Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second part of What If Naruto Left the Village with Executioner Blade. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Well, Naruto began quietly. My tale begins many years ago, when my older brother murdered my entire family. It just came out of the blue. One day we were a successful though small family of blacksmiths, and the next, everyone was dead. I managed to escape only because of pure luck. When he finally came for me, I grabbed an unfinished knife off the wall and tried to fend him off. He was very experienced, but blood made his hands slippery and he lost his grip on his weapon for just a second. In that second, I thrust my blade into his stomach and ran out of the house, never to look back. I was about 6 at the time. Naruto was happy with the response he received. The man appeared genuinely depressed, and Sirius' eyes were moist. He burst into tears, and Naruto was embraced by a bear. "Ah, to overcome such hardship must have required amazing strength," he exclaimed. The boy truly wanted to answer, but he was experiencing a strange tingling sensation throughout his body. When Tamari had hugged him, he had also experienced a strange tingling, but it was more of a circulation being cut off, tingle than a warm one. Glaring at Tamari, who was now silently laughing at his situation, he peered over Sirius' shoulder. When the large man eventually relaxed, Naruto appreciated his skeletal structure and mentally noted that he should be less angsty going forward. With a shy head rub, Sirius stepped back and said, "I must apologize, for I fear I was overcome by emotion." "No kidding, but if I can get back to my story," Naruto said, removing the kinks from his arms. "By all means," was said with an innocent smile by Sirius. Naruto paused to reflect. Since he had guessed that it would be hard to come up with a plausible backstory on the spot, he had concluded that the most sensible course of action was to incorporate ideas from the histories of people he knew with the original material he had previously made up. The best lies, he had always been told, somehow had some truth to them. Naruto braced himself, making sure Sirius wouldn't physically display his emotion again, and went on, "After that, I managed to somehow find my way to the nearby hidden village of Mist, where I worked for a barber who was an ex-nin and taught me some basic mist jutsus in his spare time. Very little of interest happened in those years, and I left the barbershop at the age of 9 to look for work as a blacksmith's apprentice. I found a shop that would allow me to work in exchange for room and board, and spent the next year and a half working there. I would have been happy working there till I was 18. But fate intervened. It turned out that the blacksmith I was working for was loyal to a nin named Momochi Zabuza. Ever heard of him?" Sirius replied, "Yes indeed. The devil of the hidden mist, failed a coup d'etat and fled the village with his followers, who I'm guessing included my master and I." "That's right," Naruto said. "I somehow got dragged along and found myself being trained in various ninja arts, awaiting the day that the hunter nins would catch up to our group. I quickly decided I wanted nothing to do with a group of missing nins." Naruto almost grinned at the irony. "And I ran away one night, slipping away in the dark." "Such bravery. I find myself in awe of your burning passion for life," said Sirius, thrusting his arm out and pumping it in the air. "I tremble at the mere thought. A young man, desperately trying to escape a horrible situation, fighting valiantly for his freedom." "Okay then," Naruto replied, not quite sure what to do with this. "Anyway, I found myself an 11-year-old with a wide range of skills but no connections to anyone, so I just started to wander from town to town doing odd jobs. Most of the time, people took pity on me and paid a high price for me to just do basic tasks." As he stroked his chin, Sirius nodded and said, "Ah yes, using one's youth and cuteness for monetary gain, very clever." Naruto raised his eyebrows. "Would you please stop interrupting me with your comments?" Stopping his smile, Sirius said, "No, they're needed." "Why?" "Because people who are lying tend to slip up when their story flow is disrupted." As Naruto answered, "What do you think I'm lying about?" Tamari began to feel uneasy. "Actually, I'm not sure. Most of what you said had the feel of truth to it," Sirius said, giving him a strange look. After giving himself a mental pat on the back, Naruto asked, "Then what makes you think I'm lying at all?" As he waited for a response, the boy went over everything he had said, searching for any errors, and discovered them at the same time as Sirius spoke. "You made the same mistake so many people in your situation make. It's a subconscious defense reaction that develops with all who are on the run. You're so willing to tell me what I want to know, but haven't told me your name yet." While all three nins waited for something to happen, there was a brief sense of tension in the air. Although Naruto was aware of his error and that his cover was at least partially exposed, Sirius appeared to be waiting for him to initiate contact. "Fushicho Naruto is my name, but I'm afraid I've given up all my cool titles." He sighed. For some, a title is something from which to draw strength, while for others it is a weight that drags you down a path you wish to avoid, he said, and you would be? More abruptly, the sand girl said, Tamari. There was a brief period of silence once more before Nimbus landed next to the group and asked, is everything okay here? After noticing the strange atmosphere. Indeed, I was just enthralled by Naruto. Kun's story. He has led a most amazing life, replied Cirrus, who had just recovered his energy and was beaming. Nimbus asked curiously, is it okay if I listen? To Naruto. That sounds like a most excellent idea. In fact, the Cloud Junin said with a brighter smile. Stratus, Cumulus. Come listen, you might learn something, he said, turning to his fellow students. Breathing heavily, his other slightly battered students fell among their small group. Cirrus looked at Naruto and said, don't mind us, keep going, Naruto.san. Uncertain of what was happening, Naruto reverted to his story, saying, during my travels, I found my way to hidden sand. After 2 hours, while Tamari and the Cloud Genin engaged in some light taijutsu sparring, Cirrus and Naruto sat beneath a tree at the edge of the training area. Cirrus raised a hand and said, you know kid, you tell really good stories. Even I stopped bothering to try deciphering the truth from what you made up. In fact, I really don't want to know the truth. You've shown no hostile intentions, and until that happens, I'll treat you the same as any other guest of the Hidden Cloud. Naruto appeared conflicted and was about to speak when Cirrus held up his hand. Thank you, Naruto said, looking down. No need to thank me, I am a friend of all who burn with youthful exuberance, said Cirrus abruptly, losing his serious demeanor. Gaara acted as Sand's representative during the hunter debriefing. Kakashi was currently covering their activities just prior to Neji confronting Naruto. So, I very gently knocked Tamari unconscious, ran to the rendezvous, and handed her off to Shikamaru, who then tied her with ropes, the masked Junin said, glancing at Gaara. The room fell silent as Kakashi paused abruptly and Shikamaru was suddenly covered in sand up to his neck. Gaara said calmly, why have you stopped? Continue with your report. Kakashi let out a cough. Well, after very gently and carefully tying Tamari up, Shikamaru stood guard. Unfortunately, due to certain oversights, she was able to escape unharmed by overpowering him. The Junin in the mask decided it was best to bring up Temari's escape right away. As Kakashi reported, time went by until he got to the section about his and Temari's encounter in the forest. At this point, Gaara's sand began to move around the room, so Kakashi hurried once more to the area where the steam blast claimed him, and the sand fell silent. Iruka, who was seated on the sidelines, could only see how true what Kakashi had told him in the forest was. The idea of his sister being restrained was enough to make Gaara look like a murderer. Thankfully, there was no more violence during the remainder of the session while Iruka, Ibiki, and Enko presented their reports. They all filed outside after the Hokage dismissed them. The last person out the door, Shikamaru, was going to go home and rest when he was suddenly covered in sand once more. As Tamari landed beside him, Naruto grinned a little. Cirrus had joined the rapidly deteriorating sparring session and was now teasing Stratus until she was insane. The sand girl gave him a painful glare and said, damn it, having to hold back this much hurts. Naruto sighed, a body trained to react instantly and with deadly precision is difficult to restrain. We train for hours every day to make ourselves as deadly as possible, so containing those combat instincts can be difficult. But it's kind of funny to watch them, isn't it? He said abruptly, his voice growing a little strained. Looking up at the sky, Tamari said, yeah. The two of them leaned lightly against one another as Naruto moved closer. As his students sighed, Cirrus posed and he asked, how long ago was it? Or were we ever so innocent? We were, but that time seems now like it was a foolish daydream, Tamari said, laughing but with a sorrowful tone. Naruto acknowledged silently with a nod. They both watched as Cumulus and Nimbus jumped Stratus from behind, grappled him to the ground, and tied him up with twine. In a strange dogpile of laughing forms, the two girls ruthlessly tickled the restrained boy before screaming when Cirrus tackled them from behind. Why, she abruptly asked, do you put so much trust in Cirrus? We don't even know anything about him. Naruto took his time. That man knows what it truly is to be a shinobi, and yet he continues to be one. He understands how difficult life can be. After breaking free from his restraints, Stratus crawled out of the pile and dove on top of it. Tamari questioned, how do you know all this? Something changes in a person when they've been subjected to too much pain and loneliness, and it's obvious for those of us who know what we're looking for. His voice sounded so dejected at that moment that Tamari felt it deeply. She was at a loss for words, so she reached an arm over Naruto's shoulder and drew him a little closer. A moment later, she felt him tentatively reach around her waist. They held each other in a semi-hug while they sat and watched the Cloud Ninjas at play. Shikamaru was patient despite spending some time in the dark. The sand on his head eventually retreated, and he was confronted by Baki, Gaara, and Kankuro in a tiny room. The shadow user had hoped it wouldn't be him, but he had known that at least one team member would experience something similar. In such cases, it was standard procedure for any secondary group interested in the mission, the Sand in this case, to perform their own informal debriefing. Shikamaru turned to face the three individuals in front of him. Gaara barked, "You will tell me everything that happened in your own words. I want to know every detail of what you observed about my sister." Shikamaru simply sighed. The night would be long. 1 month later, Tamari stood in the training field as evening descended, encircled by a variety of clones. Nimbus preferred water clones, while Cumulus and Stratus used the regular variety. She was aware that the real people were somewhere among the clones, but it would be difficult to locate them. She was engaged in what Cirrus referred to as teamwork exercises, which required Stratus, Cumulus, and Nimbus to use every resource at their disposal to try to defeat Tamari or Naruto, both of whom were limited to taijutsu. The Cloud Genin had already lost 59 times in a row. At this point in their 60th attempt, Tamari was observing a noticeable application of Naruto. Like strategies. Sadly, their strategy of making a million clones and attacking blindly wasn't any more effective than Naruto's. In the 6 minutes that the spar had lasted, Tamari had destroyed nearly 2/3 of the clones and was unharmed. The three attackers, who were still hidden, complained together because they knew this battle would soon be over. The defender would switch every time a match concluded, meaning Naruto would be up next. The Genin would occasionally come up with a clever scheme and had come very close to capturing Tamari on a couple of occasions, but despite their best efforts, they had failed to even hit the Fox Boy. Only half of the day was ever spent with Cirrus and his group. The other half was spent either amusing themselves or practicing their weapons and testing out more advanced jutsus in the wilderness just outside Hidden Cloud. Although they had not yet embarked on any significant missions and led rather dull lives, they were both happy. The two swiftly established themselves as unofficial members of the Storm of Righteous Fury after their first day. The two Nuknins received some cash and were permitted to sleep in the training field in exchange for helping Team 5 accomplish more tasks in a day than any other Genin team, including walking more dogs and pulling more weeds. However, they were not registered anywhere. Naruto waited for his turn to train. While standing apart, he watched with amusement as Temari's spinning kick eliminated another half-dozen clones. He knew it was almost time to go, but he hadn't told her yet. Some of the other Cloud Junin were growing suspicious, and he had seen the signs. Leaving didn't make him feel all that sad. Despite their similar ages, the Genin saw him more as a superior than a friend, and he hadn't really interacted with anyone outside the team. Actually, the only person Naruto truly believed he would miss was Cirrus. Through their numerous encounters, Naruto and Cirrus had developed a somewhat peculiar bond and a unique understanding. Since they were both much more reclusive when not in a crowd, they communicated primarily nonverbally. When Tamari returned 4 hours later, she discovered that neither had moved from the night she had seen them lying in the field gazing at the stars. Even though they were not conversing, Tamari had the impression that she would have been interrupting if she had spoken. Even though their friendship had taken a rather strange turn, Naruto could honestly say that he considered the slightly strange man to be a friend. Flashback. On the 7th day since Cirrus had discovered them lying in his training field, the Junin had offered to take them out to dinner because they were truly out of money after a particularly demanding training session. They ended up at a all-you-can-eat ramen stand after Naruto persuaded the Sand Girl to try the ramen he had suggested right away, which Tamari and Cirrus took with annoyance and amusement, respectively. Naruto and Cirrus were contentedly inhaling their noodles as Tamari hurriedly finished her one bowl of ramen and announced that she was returning to polish her fan. "I have to say I'm curious about something," Naruto said, turning to his companion after finishing 11 bowls and patting his belly. Cirrus intended to say, "Really, what?" but his mouth was full, so it came out more like, "Why we, FWA? Why are you helping us?" Naruto asked, leaning on his hand and resting his elbow on the counter. After swallowing, Cirrus asked, "Why wouldn't I?" The Junin tightened his grip as Naruto's. "If it were just me, I would be fine with us both playing fools, but I have someone else to look out for, and you know perfectly well that we're not supposed to be in this village. I've been as straight with you as I can be, so I want the same from you." With only 2 legs touching the floor, Cirrus leaned back on his stool and said, "I suppose that's fair, but the answer is simple. I envy your conviction." Despite his mild surprise, Naruto said, "Elaborate." Cirrus asked for a second bowl. "When one was 16, I was still a genin, and had been dating one of my teammates for a year and a half. I supposed what we had might have one day led to something more, since I always wanted kids, but we were one day assigned what was supposed to be a simple mission, just hunting down some highway robbers, but they had a few Chunin-level nins among them." A beer was requested by Cirrus before he resumed his story. "It really shouldn't have been a big deal. Our teacher, Sume Hirato, was a Junin, so logically, we should have won without much trouble." The elderly man returned with the ramen. "And what happened during the battle?" Naruto decided to gently encourage Cirrus, who had stopped talking and appeared disoriented, to continue. After balancing and placing his legs on the counter, Cirrus leaned back a little more. There was no battle. Within seconds of our ambush, my 2 teammates were down with minor wounds." Not expecting such a fast response, and now missing most of his, he said sourly, "Meat Shield." Our Junin instructor turned and ran. The majority of the skin on his left sleeve was discolored scar tissue, as he could see when he pulled it up. With the major threat gone, we stood no chance. My teammates died helpless, on the ground, and I escaped by using my arm to shield myself from the rain of kunai that followed me. I was hit 27 times, and almost lost my arm. I came to headquarters after being discharged from the hospital to check on the mission report, and all it said was, "Mission failed. 2 casualties," which was the sum total of how much the village valued the lives of my friend and love. Sume wasn't even reprimanded, he said, grabbing a paper cup and pouring his beer into it. Naruto examined the paper beer cup with interest after he handed it to him. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to run as far as I could from Hidden Cloud and all it represented, but I never worked up the nerve. All I have been able to do is make sure that at least one genin team has a teacher who will never abandon them. But that's a lot better than nothing, isn't it? Naruto said as he sat quietly for a while. To the burning passion of youth, Cirrus said with a small smile while raising his bottle. Raising his paper cup, Naruto said, "To the burning passion of youth." End of flashback. For a few days, Cirrus had been a little more reclusive, and when he had only required his students to perform their introductory pose sequence 3 times one morning rather than the customary 10, and kept his voice at normal volume, they had asked him about his health. Even when Cirrus was jumping through the air and shouting about energy and spirit, Naruto had begun to treat him with more respect after that. When Naruto looked up, he saw that Temari had just finished eliminating the clones, exposing 3 genin that had been wiped out. She hadn't even perspired. She strolled over to where the 2 were now sitting and said, "Your turn." "We're done for the day, we have things we need to do," he said, shaking his head. "All right, so what are the things we need to do?" Temari shrugged. "We need to get out of here tonight. There have been too many people inquiring about our presence." "And whose fault is that, exactly?" she asked, shaking her head. Flashback. The 3 of them found themselves dining out once more 3 weeks after their arrival. They were dining in a rather standard bar and grill type of establishment, refusing ramen. Everything had been alright for the first few minutes, but then Naruto began to notice things. Numerous ninjas were eating, and many of them were pointing and whispering to Cirrus. Some of them even burst out laughing and feigned to strike poses. Just as Naruto opened his mouth to speak, a group of people came to their table. The first to speak was the middle one, who was clearly the leader. "Eating with mercenaries, Cirrus? I never thought even you would sink this low." Many ninjas denigrated those who fought for money but lacked ninja training. Most would think they were mercenaries because Naruto was carrying a sword as large as his own, which no other shinobi would use, and they lacked forehead protectors. With a scowl, Naruto said, "I don't kill for money." "Oh, how do you decide who to kill then?" the nin asked him with a smug grin. Here, in his rage, Naruto made his fatal error by exposing his fangs and letting some of his chakra leak out, saying, "Whomever I want." The group of offending nins abruptly became very apprehensive and retreated, but Cirrus took hold of his arm and pulled him from the restaurant, Temari trailing behind. "That was very stupid, Naruto," sighed Cirrus after they were outside. Naturally, Naruto was already aware of this and was drooping his head. It seemed to him that this would eventually come back to haunt him. End of flashback. He had heard some of the rumors, and ever since that day, people had begun to look at him whenever he passed. Even though they were all garbage, people quickly began to show interest in him. They had to depart now. As Stratus, Cumulus, and Nimbus stretched out in the field, Naruto and Temari began packing up what little they had. Isn't it your turn to defend, Naruto-kun? Said Cirrus, who had landed next to them after noticing something was wrong from his vantage point. I'm afraid we need to get ready, we're going to be leaving tonight, the boy said, shaking his head. Ah yes, I feared this day would come soon, said Cirrus, who appeared sad but unsurprised. Tamari said, hey, you guys, come over here for a second, to the genin in the field. Naruto and Tamari left the field that had been their home for a month and made their way to the wall after everyone had been informed of their departure. Everything had been packed up, and Cirrus had given bear hugs to everyone, including his students, just for fun. As they got closer to the barrier, Naruto appeared agitated and abruptly veered off course. As he entered a convenience store and began perusing a phone book, the girl gave him a strange look. Stratus was startled to discover a village police officer on the other side of his door when he was woken up the following morning by a knock. Excuse me, the individual replied, all the shinobi in the village are gathering, there's been an incident. Stratus was amazed by the sight of so many shinobi in one location when he reached the base of the tower. This morning, a mailman found one of our shinobi murdered in his bed, the Raikage said, glancing over the group gathered in front of him as he emerged from the tower. His name was Sume Hirato, a Junin. I want you all to go about your normal business, but rest assured that matter will be fully investigated. That is all. The crowd gasped. His teammates were waiting for him on the training field, so Stratus hurried there. As they waited for their teacher to arrive, the three began discussing the Raikage's announcement with excitement. As they strolled, Tamari observed Naruto. Did he deserve that? She asked, glancing at the bloodstains on his sword wrappings. Naruto turned to face her and said, yes. After giving him a questioning glance and tilting her head to the side, she nodded. Staring at the open but unopened bottle of beer in front of him, Cirrus was seated at the ramen stand in the exact same chair he had occupied 3 weeks prior. He was experiencing a plethora of emotions at the time that he was unable to adequately describe. Sume Hirato had been sliced cleanly in half, not just killed, and Cirrus had access to information that was typically restricted. Suddenly, everything Cirrus had gone through came flooding back to him, most vividly the image of his teammates lying there, abandoned, being attacked from every direction. Screaming her last was the voice of the only girl he had ever loved. As he silently toasted his bottle and took a swig, tears streamed down his cheeks. He placed the remaining cash on the counter and used his sleeve to wipe his face. He had to meet his students now. Naruto, nearly awake, swiped at the alarm clock beside his bed, his ears ringing. He stretched as he combed through recent memories, and it took a moment to recall his location. 2 days after departing Hidden Cloud, they were now in a small town just a day's drive from Oceanside, the next city they intended to visit. Tamari had already left, judging by the appearance of the room, most likely to visit the musicians. Naruto thought the name of their current location, Snaken, was rather strange, but it was well known for its street entertainers. After grabbing his bag, he left their room, determined to find his friend. As he wandered, the streets appeared strangely deserted, and Naruto began to suspect something. He passed a couple of small musicians, but no one or anything interesting. When he eventually asked someone what was happening, an elderly man pointed him in the direction of stage 6. When he got there, he discovered that, fortunately, finding Tamari wouldn't be too tough because everyone in the town appeared to be congregated in one spot. At least all the girls. 2 artists were performing for a crowd of enamored fans and their envious boyfriends, who enjoyed the music anyhow, on one of the bigger stages that were strewn throughout the streets. A dark-haired guitarist was the main attraction. He played so quickly that even Naruto's reflexes were impressed. His hands moved over the strings of his instrument as if it were about to catch fire. A bigger man was standing behind him, pounding a big African drum at a steady tempo. Something about the 2 performers didn't feel quite right, so Naruto paused to look more closely at them. He sighed as he saw that Tamari was as enthralled as the others, staring up at the stage. Naruto's eyes widened as the drummer gave him a startling, distinctly shark-like smile. Naruto had to think quickly because the song only lasted a minute. In order to activate a few fear stimuli, he pushed his way to the front of the crowd, crossed his arms, turned away from the stage, and said, "I'm sorry folks, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the show is over for now." The crowd let out a collective groan and began to thin out, and Tamari appeared both irritated and perplexed. "What the hell are you 2 doing here, Itachi?" Naruto exclaimed as he leapt onto the stage and seized the guitarist's shoulder. After briefly turning on his Sharingan, the Uchiha said, "Various things, Naruto-kun, but primarily looking for you." The boy appeared perplexed and asked, "Why?" We'll talk somewhere more private, said Kisame, leaning over his drum. Okay. You guys grab your stuff and I'll take you back to our room, Naruto said, simply grabbing his head. Itachi and Kisame both raised their eyebrows at the same time and said, "You did say our room, didn't you?" He looked at Temari, who appeared even more perplexed and was still lying on the ground in front of the stage. Kisame smiled and said, "Already got a girl? You work fast, don't you, brat?" As the Akatsuki followed his gaze. "Grab the instruments, explaining will be done later," Naruto said, turning to Temari, who appeared ready to speak. "That applies to you too. All will become clear once we get out of the freaking street. I hope." Naruto tightened his hold on his head. After grabbing their instruments, Itachi and Kisame's genjutsu ed forms followed Naruto back to the hotel. The Akatsuki broke their illusion as soon as they were all standing in the room, and Temari let out a little gasp when she saw Kisame. Itachi's guitar appeared genuine, but Samahata was revealed when the drum poofed away. Naruto was lying on the mattress. "Okay, first things first. Temari, this is Hoshigaki Kisame, and that's Uchiha Itachi, who are about to explain why they're stalking me and playing music for donations." In fact, Naruto couldn't decide which of those two things he thought was more strange. With a glance that made it clear the Shark Man would be providing the explanation, Itachi simply leaned against the wall and took a stick of Pocky out of his pocket. Kisame exhaled. "We tracked you down pretty easily, as there aren't many places you can go from Hidden Cloud. As to why we're looking for you, we were traveling this way anyway, and have been given a mission offer that might interest you." Kisame looked at Temari with an approving, "And your friend?" "Okay. But I'm still not getting the part where two S-class Nukenans are playing music in the street," Naruto said, nodding in agreement. The Shark Man sighed once more. "We were given a mission allowance, but we were dropping Kirin off in a village up north, and there just happened to be a Pocky factory there, and coincidentally, it was Pocky Appreciation Week, and through mysterious circumstances, Itachi somehow managed to lose our money bag and was given a few hundred free boxes of Pocky." Itachi grinned to himself as he continued to lean against the wall. "And, of course, chicks dig guys who can play guitar. So the two most deadly men on the planet are broke because Itachi has no self-control," Kisame explained, but Naruto hung his head halfway through. "I do too," glared Itachi. "Really?" Kisame said. "A few hundred boxes of Pocky," said Naruto, raising an eyebrow. "Getting a bit mouthy, aren't we, brat?" Itachi asked, raising an eyebrow to meet Naruto's. As Naruto and Itachi smirked at each other, Temari, who had been quietly backing toward the door during their banter, turned and hurried out. Only when they heard the door slam did the other people in the room notice. After a moment of inaction on the part of everyone else, Naruto followed her. Kisame grabbed the remote control from its spot on a side table and turned on the television as the door slammed a second time. "That could have gone better," Itachi said, reaching for another stick of delicious chocolate and turning to face his partner. Naruto glanced in both directions and noticed the stairwell door on his left closing. After running, he took 4 steps to the door and pulled it open. He began to ascend the twisting stairs after hearing a noise above him. He moved methodically rather than hurriedly. After climbing 4 floors, he heard the door to the roof. A few seconds later, he found himself facing that door and cautiously opened it so as not to startle the girl who seemed to be bothered. When the sun struck his eyes, he winced a little as he stepped onto the roof. Temari stood facing away from him and seemed to be very uninterested in anything. She was speaking in a strange voice. "It's funny. I have actually heard of Hoshigaki Kisame. He killed most of Water Country's generals and lords. 39 people in all. He also killed most of their guards and attendants, another 127 people." With a strange churning in his stomach, Naruto watched Temari slowly turn to face him and say, "He is a person of very rare variety. He scares me shitless." Temari's tone increased. "And do you know what? The other one seems even more frightening." I was shaking. "Me? The sister of Sabaku no Gaara is afraid of a little girly man with a ponytail." At last, she turned completely around and faced him. "Those two are real S-class criminals, Naruto, and they're really dangerous," she said. Naruto became irritated all of a sudden. She still didn't get it, even after all of their time together. "We are all Nukenin, and we do what we have to. Kisame and Itachi have just had more difficult lives than we have. So they have had to kill more people." After some thought, Temari asked, "So, that makes their killing okay?" "Sometimes, yes." Naruto sighed, then growled, "I didn't see you having moral qualms about killing that leaf hunter who went after you." Temari looked at him. "But those two kill just because it's convenient, they're monsters." It had hit the tender spot. "Like me, you mean? You think I'm a monster?" Naruto asked abruptly as he stepped closer to her. But you're not normally like that. You only hurt people when, Temari said, shaking her head. As he advanced further, Naruto's red chakra began to pulse around him. When I need to. When people get in my way. Do you see a difference between what I do and what those two Akatsuki do? He asked. Yes, she said, losing some of her conviction. Temari sensed the charge in the air as the red and blue energy encircled Naruto, and the chakra began to pulse more intensely. His pupils, which had maintained eye contact during their conversation, abruptly shrank and narrowed into slits. He stepped a little closer again, his eyes blazing into her as though they could see into her soul, and Temari found herself resisting the impulse to back away. He moved closer. Then another. Now that they were only a few feet apart, Naruto's chakra burst forth. Fear factor was muted by Kisame as two heads snapped upward. What are they doing up there? Itachi asked, taking a deep breath. I have no idea, but the brat sure is impressive. I have been thinking recently that his may be even bigger than yours, Itachi, said his blue-skinned partner, shaking his head. Why would you be thinking about that? Wait, his is not bigger than mine, Itachi said, glancing at him. Kisame sighed. I really don't know Itachi, I know you pretty well, and have seen you at work, but this kid just blows me away. Kisame, I'll let you know that you have never seen me at work, and even if you had, it's how you use it that matters, said the irritated Uchiha. What about that girl in Hidden Rain? She did a number on you. Your control was pathetic. Kisame pondered for a moment. How do you know about that? Itachi asked, looking on the verge of a seizure. I was there, remember? Kisame asked, giving his partner a strange look. What? Nodded. Since your memory appears to be shot, I took over after you fell unconscious, after just 3 rounds. Itachi was simultaneously horrified and perplexed. He had no recollection of such things. And plus, Naruto has been getting a lot of practice lately, Kisame added. How do you mean? Well, he has been traveling with that sand girl for some time now, and I guess they have 1 or 2 hours a day to spare. Add that up and you get a whole lot of time. Kisame, they're just kids still. How could they have an hour or 2 a day for that? Exclaimed Itachi, almost hysterically. Kisame began to worry about his partner's mental well-being. We both used to train for 8 hours a day, and we weren't much older than them, Itachi. We knew Naruto's chakra reserves would grow larger than ours, and I know your chakra control is almost perfect, so there's no need to get so touchy about it. I was just joking, sheesh. Suddenly, everything made sense to Itachi. We were talking about chakra size? She asked. What did you think we were talking about, Itachi? His partner asked, staring at him. Itachi remained quiet, and Kisami's expression abruptly changed to one of comprehension. The shark man started giggling. Damn it, it's not funny, Kisame. Okay, then, laugh away, I'm going to go see what's going on, Itachi said, clenching his fists. Kisame continued to snicker. Well, I now know why you got your ass kicked in that fight with that Rain Junin last year, tisk tisk. Itachi, picking up chicks before missions is not a good thing. From the corridor, Itachi swore at him. Temari found herself in a maelstrom. Her skin burned from the heat, her senses completely overpowered by the immense amounts of chakra. She had the impression that she was inside a hurricane but was not being raised. She could still see those flaming red eyes, though, despite everything. Naruto moved closer, closing the distance to just a few inches. She could feel claws when he reached up and grabbed her shoulder. His fangs had grown longer and his facial markings darker. How about now, Temari-san? Do you think I'm a monster now? Temari opened her mouth to respond, but her lips remained closed. The figure before her brought back countless memories of similar encounters with her brother. Gaara had always run as fast and far as she could when she lost control. However, there was a part of her that prevented her from doing so, and that part of her was saying something that was extremely hard to hear, but if she paid close attention. Temari abruptly reached up, took Naruto's arm, and drew him in, nearly making him jump. As her eyes lost their fear and gazed back into his with defiance, the fox boy felt his menace ebbing away. You try to drive me away, but why? Why do you react in anger? She said, barely raising her voice above a whisper. Temari continued to think aloud. You're trying to protect yourself. You're afraid I might hurt you, so you withdraw, hiding behind your facade. I spent my whole life dealing with a person who did the same thing, and every time he put of his defenses, I ran away. Still whispering, but now I'm stronger, and there's a flaw in your defense. If someone has enough courage, they can exploit it, Naruto opened his mouth but was unable to speak as Tamari slowly leaned her body on his. And what is that? The fox boy forced out of his dry mouth. Your defenses won't force me away if I can get close enough to you. She inhaled deeply before bringing his entire body close to hers and planting a kiss on him. After a brief period of inaction, Naruto gradually experienced that comfortable and recognizable tingling sensation. He eased up and put one arm around her small back. Two figures were standing guard at the roof's still, open door. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are those two making out in the eye of a chakra storm? Kisame asked, glancing down at Itachi. Itachi acknowledged with a, How long do figure it'll be before Naruto drops from chakra depletion? I would say about 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, now, Itachi said, taking out his watch. As the chakra surrounding them vanished and Naruto abruptly went limp, Tamari gasped. The sound of slow, steady breathing was a relief as she quickly laid him out on the roof and put her head to his chest. She felt someone sitting next to her when she sat up. Well, it appears our little friend was too distracted, Kisame said, crouching down and lifting Naruto over his shoulder. It's not too bad, though, so he should be up after a night's sleep, Tamari blushed. The shark man got to his feet and made his way toward the stairs. Tamari was gazing up at the sky while Itachi stood in the center of the roof. She approached him slowly after a few minutes and said, You have killed a lot of people. Itachi gave a nod. I want you to tell me why. I want to know why you kill people, Tamari said, glancing down at her feet. Itachi asked, Why do you wish to know? With an expression that remained unchanged. Tamari looked at Naruto's unconscious form, which Kisame was holding like a bag of potatoes, and said, Because I am a missing nin, but I don't understand you people yet, but she did want to. Standing atop a building, surrounded by his numerous minions, was the Dark Avenger. He appeared to be deep in thought, holding a newspaper in his right hand. With his sound forehead protector gleaming in the light, his foremost minion advanced and asked, So, what are we going to do? As he looked at the pathetic remnants of a once great military force, the Avenger said, We have no choice. I will not allow the last of Orochimaru Sama's legacy to be destroyed by Konoha scum. The newspaper that slowly floated to the ground was the only indication that anyone had been present as the group of shinobi nodded and disappeared. The paper unrolled as a gust of wind blew over the building, displaying the headline. Captured. Uchiha Sasuke. Imminent execution. Naruto was contentedly eating warm ramen in bed the following day when he heard arguing outside the room. Itachi and his companion rushed into the room. Itachi, you can't just pull shit like this. What is the council going to say? Kisame said, his expression conflicted. Itachi was dead. Screw the council. Screw our mission. You can tell those old bums whatever you want. I have to do this. With the noodles still in his mouth, Naruto glanced from one to the other and asked, What's happened? When Tamari got back to the hotel, Naruto yelled, What, you're kidding? Everyone was seated around the small round side table when she hurried into the room. Itachi was saying, I'm quite serious. I didn't spare my little brother all those times just to watch him get killed for coming after me. With their hands tapping on their sword hilts in uneasy habit, Kisame and Naruto were both staring at him incredulously. Why do you two care so much, anyway? Itachi merely gave them a glare. They both gave him a stupid look and said, We're going with you. Now, either we can have a long painful argument, ending with you agreeing to our coming along, or you could just say, yes, now. Naruto interrupted the Uchiha as he blinked and began to shake his head. Fine, Itachi sighed. What are we doing? Tamari began to wave her hands in the air. Naruto glanced at her, We're doing exactly what I was hoping to never do again. We're going back to Konoha, to stop the bastard from getting himself killed. Translation? She asked, turning to Kisame. He lifted Samahata and said, Uchiha Sasuke has been captured and is headed for execution. It looks like we're going to save him. We are going to take on a whole village of people to save one person? 4 of us? Tamari asked with a doubtful expression. Well, yeah, is there a problem with that? Naruto nodded as the 3 S-class Nukemans stared. You males are all freaks, she said, glancing at the faces around her. I guess we should start getting ready now. Can you two get all your stuff in less than 30 minutes? Itachi picked up his guitar and walked out the door as the 2 Akatsuki nodded and left the room. When they were by themselves, Tamari collapsed onto the bed beside Naruto and leaned against him, giving him room to put an arm around her waist. The only awkwardness between them was that they hadn't spoken since the previous day. Naturally, Naruto chose the first thing that came to mind because he needed to start a conversation. You seem to be getting along with Itachi and Kisame today. What brought on this change? Temari simply shook her head, saying, "We were up late last night talking. We played the question game," despite being mildly irritated by his choice of subject. The question game? Yeah. All three of us sat in a circle and took turns asking someone else a question which they have to answer. It really helped me get used to them, and they're kind of amusing in their own way. Naruto smiled and rested his head on the pillow, mildly amused at the idea of Kisame and Itachi playing games for a sleepover. Actually, Temari replied, the game might have gone on longer, but Itachi and Kisame got into a little spat. With a broader smile, Naruto said, "Do tell." Well, it was Kisame's turn to ask, and he suddenly got a sneaky look on his face. I don't remember exactly, but his question had something to do with you and Wong's size. Itachi almost killed him. After a minute of laughter, Naruto became progressively quiet, and the two of them lay in silence, happy to simply hold each other. Temari's gaze shifted to her legs. Her legs had been somewhat thin but well sculpted only a few months prior. At the moment, she appeared capable of using them to crush a rhinoceros. You might wonder why her legs were getting so much muscle. "We need to take a break, we have been running for 20 freaking hours," she said, glaring at the three individuals in front of her. To her immense dismay, Naruto turned to face her and said, "So, we don't know when the execution is going to be, we need to move fast." He didn't even appear tired. She raised her eyebrows. "Listen, unlike the rest of you, I do not have unlimited stamina, and I need to woe." Her outburst was interrupted when Naruto abruptly halted, swung his sword at Itachi, and caught her as she flew by, lifting her onto his back and moving on. As he ran, the Uchiha snatched Seirei Kurite out of the air and leaned it against his shoulder without thinking. After a brief moment of realization, Temari prodded Naruto's head and said, "You do understand that if this were any other situation, I would kick your ass for pulling a stunt like that. But we're in this situation, so don't complain unless you want to run again," said Naruto with a sly smile. Temari merely complained while observing the world go by. With a pounding heart, Haruno Sakura stood before the door. With the moral support of Kakashi and Lee, she stepped forward and turned the handle slowly. The door opened to reveal a 10.by.10 foot space with just one light bulb and no windows. One figure was strapped to the far wall of the room, his limbs held separately to the wall by leather belts, his fingers tied together with thread to prevent the use of hand seals, and his mouth covered by a metal mask that prevented movement or speech. At the analogy, Sakura felt the bile rise in her throat. He appeared to be crucified against the wall. Indeed, he had been crucified by the Konoha Council, the Hokage, and the people who had once adored him. As the door opened, Sasuke slowly raised his head, his eyes stinging from the unfamiliar light. He made the most of his eyes, the only parts of him that could move, to study his guests. Sakura entered the room slowly and turned to face the person who had once been her true love. Even though she was aware of everything he had done, she was still unable to contain her tears when she saw him in this state. As she approached him and slowly raised a hand to touch his face, they moved silently down her face. "Look at you, Sasuke-kun. Is this what you wanted?" She let go of her hand and turned to face the floor. "The press love you, only two survivors of a clan, and they're both S-class missing nins. Talk of cursed blood is all over the tabloids, and people eat it up. I try to believe that somehow, all of this is just a big mistake, you, Naruto, but then I go meet with my new team and realize it's real, it's all horribly real." Sasuke's eyes suddenly became brighter, and he attempted to speak through his gag. "MMPH, Fat APPNDURUO." After giving Kakashi a cautious nod, Sakura turned back to face him and reached for Sasuke's mask. "What happened to Naruto?" the Uchiha repeated, stretching his neck after the gag and chunk of metal covering his face were taken off. Sakura chuckled bitterly. "You don't know? He left almost right after you did. A hunter team was sent after him, but no one will tell me what happened to him. I don't even know if Naruto is dead or alive." Sasuke simply gaped. He would have assumed that the likelihood of Naruto leaving Konoha was comparable to that of Iruka dating Anko, Rock Lee shaving his brows, or Itachi saving him from death. Sasuke shook his head to stop thinking about it, wondering where those strange similes had come from, but then he saw Lee standing outside the room's door. The green beast's face was now smooth skin instead of the two huge, proud, dark eyebrows that had once been there. Sasuke shuddered. Uchiha Itachi was frantically trying to escape. Not literally, of course, because he had never really run for his life over anything, in fact, nothing at all. He was running, to be precise, to avoid fan fwappage. Being thwapped with a fan, that is. A big fan, actually. Following 3 days of non-stop running, the newspaper announced that Sasuke's execution would occur in 2.5 weeks, giving plenty of time to travel to Konoha. A certain girl with extremely blistered feet was obviously out for blood. Regretfully for Temari, Itachi was not only powerful but also incredibly quick. As she split another tree trunk in two, she snarled. She had a very slim chance of actually hitting him, as was fairly obvious, but the destruction was therapeutic. From the sidelines, Naruto and Kisame merely observed with mild amusement, interjecting the phrases, "Ooh, close one," or, "You almost got him there." This continued for roughly 6 minutes before Temari's blisters finally got the better of her and she fell to her knees, giving Itachi a glare for good measure. 13 days later, the execution plans were in Tsunade's hand as she stood atop her tower. She was certain that someone would attempt to rescue the condemned Uchiha, but she was unsure of who it would be. The Dark Avenger was a new killer who sounded like a hidden sound, and she was concerned about him. All of his targets had some connection to leaves, and the different ways of killing touched a nerve that made her think too much of her snake, like former teammate. Although no suspicious activity had been noticed, all of Sasuke's friends and associates were under constant ambush surveillance, including Kakashi, who was the only one to notice his watchers thus far. Since most of Konoha would be present at the execution, she was also concerned about stronger forces from outside the village attempting to exploit the distraction. They wanted to see at least one traitor killed because they had been denied any information about Naruto, or the demon, as they called him. Tsunade was always disgusted by the fact that such ordinary people could be so ruthless, but she was powerless to change Sasuke's destiny. Making sure nothing else happened was the least she could do. A task force of former sound nins breaking through the walls and attempting a full-scale rescue would pose the biggest threat. Regardless of the outcome, many people would perish. Making sure there was a strong perimeter around the stage where the execution would take place would be her top priority. The boy's choice of death by fire jutsu, which was the most honorable but also the most painful, demonstrated his lack of fear. In a bitterly ironic way, Tsunade felt it was rather appropriate. She was obsessing over everything because she had a gut feeling that something significant was going to happen in 4 days, so she would have to pray and try her hardest. Sabaku no Gaara sat on a building's roof across town and gazed up at the sky. The Dark Avenger wore all black clothing, a black high-collar shirt, black shoes, and black pants. He could have been mistaken for a priest if it weren't for the sound protector he wore around his head. He carefully examined the meager forces at his command, pushing his glasses up on his nose. He was determined not to make any mistakes, but he had very few illusions about his chances of success. He allowed his thoughts to wander about how to persuade the guards to let them in. He would need to be extremely cunning to persuade the guard that he needed to enter the village because Tsunade had most likely closed the border. Unfortunately, his ruse would probably fail because Junin would probably be the ones watching the entrance. His team was preparing, and Konoha was just a few hours away. In order to gain a few minutes to talk to the condemned man, they were infiltrating as journalists and traveling a long and dangerous distance to the village. Even though they were permitted entry into the village under the devious disguise, his chances of actually having a conversation with Sasuke were practically non-existent. The more he considered it, the more he realized that he was completely screwed. The Dark Avenger sighed and pinched his nose. Calmly, Itachi placed his pocky bag on the floor and looked at the scene. Temari and Naruto were sitting on the ground, each with a few cards in their hands, and they appeared unaware of him. A lot of questions were bothering Uchiha Itachi as he watched their play. Where was the source of the menacing music that followed him everywhere? Why was the platypus created by God? Why does 11 not sound like 1ty.1? Temari was dressed in his clothes, but why? His mind, being as quick as it was, ranked these questions in order of importance, concluding that the last was the most important. Itachi cleared his throat as he announced his presence in the camp, but neither player raised their cards. "Excuse me, Temari-san, why are you wearing my clothing? Strip poker is no fun when you only wear 5 articles of clothing, and we have very few extra clothes of our own, so we borrowed some of yours," said Naruto, as Temari didn't appear to hear him. "Did it ever occur to you that I might not want you wearing my clothes?" Itachi asked, feeling a headache coming on. As Naruto dealt another hand, Temari, cursing, pulled off one of her socks and said, "No, it didn't. And besides, I'm wearing Kisami's, and you and Temari happen to be similar in size, so she got all yours. Lucky for me Kisame has better taste." So, the shark man asked, "Who's winning?" Itachi was about to reply when Kisame passed him and threw their groceries at the base of a tree. It made the Uchiha twitch. Naruto smiled when he noticed that Itachi was becoming more erratic. You'll get your stuff back as soon as Temari loses. Temari's, hit me, was almost a growl as it was her turn to become irritated. She was aware that she was losing. Her family had always preferred go fish to blackjack. Itachi sat down beside Naruto and accepted his fate, waiting for the inevitable to arrive precisely 19 minutes and 47 seconds later. If you think I'm taking off anymore, you can go, bleep, with your bleep, while bleep-ing yourself, Temari said, stripped down to her net shirt and underwear. Calmly, Itachi gathered his personal belongings from the heap of clothes and proceeded to his tent, making sure to bring his newly purchased week's worth of Pocky. He left behind Kyuubi inside Seirei Kurite, who felt a lot like Kisame, who was amused but felt a little cheated, Naruto, who didn't really understand how he was feeling, and a redressing Temari, who was irritated and mildly embarrassed. For a few minutes, this conflict of emotions created a strange tense feeling, but Naruto eventually grew bored and began gathering sticks for a fire. Temari and Kisame soon began quietly assisting, and the supper food was soon sizzling. After a nearly 20-minute silence, Kisame, who regrettably always felt the need to speak last, said, "But you know, Temari-san, you really shouldn't start things you're not willing to finish." A thrown kunai nicked his ear, and his blue face broke into another smile. "Nay, Kisame. Why do you think God made the platypus?" Itachi asked his partner as he abruptly sat up in his bag late that night while everyone else was sleeping. Kisame blinked drowsily. "Damn it, Itachi, go to sleep? Wah?" 4 days later, on the day of the execution, Sakura was standing in front of that awful door once more. Sasuke's burned body would hit the ground at precisely 12:01, and it was 11:25. She had been granted the authority to serve him his final meal, but she had no intention of being present to witness it. 2 complete squads of Anbu were with her, and they would wait outside the door in case someone tried to flee. With a tray of food in hand, Sakura entered the room slowly as the door slid silently open. Sasuke had only requested a bowl of chicken fried rice and a glass of water for his last meal. She placed the tray on the floor and cautiously shut the door behind her. As the last restraint was taken off, the Uchiha nearly fell on her as her hand reached up and undid each of the 5 straps securing him to the wall. He eventually collected himself and was able to sit on the ground as Sakura untied the string that held his fingers together and removed his mask. As Sakura carefully arranged the food in front of him and he began to eat, they were nearly silent. She was horrified by how frail he appeared. He had shed a lot of weight, which had sharpened his cheekbones, and his arms had lost the muscular appearance she had admired. These thoughts made her feel shallow, but the thin figure in front of her was nothing like the self-assured but quiet boy she had fallen in love with all those years ago. When he looked up at her, Sakura saw that his untidy hair had grown longer, giving him a wilder appearance. In a harsh, scratchy voice, he said, "Thank you for this, Sakura." "Don't thank me. Sasuke-kun. Not now." She began to cry even though she had vowed not to cry again. "I have a request, one final thing I would like you to do for me," the Uchiha said after giving her a close examination. She said, "You know I'd do anything for you, Sasuke-kun," grinning and wiping away her tears. Looking up at his cell's roof, he said, "I want you to be there, at noon today. I want you to promise that, no matter what, you won't look away." Sakura nodded silently, unsure of what to say but unable to turn him down. He grinned and returned to eating in silence. "Good," he said. Tsunade stood looking out over the throng. The training field they were using was nearly full, and it did appear that the majority of Konoha's population had arrived. The time was 11:53. The prisoner would appear in a matter of seconds. The ground shook abruptly, and Tsunade's eyes widened as she saw flame spouts shooting upward throughout the village. A Junin fell in front of her. "No need to be alarmed, Suande-sama. It appears that your guess was correct. A group of nins were discovered in the village less than 8 minutes ago, but have been already disposed of. It appears they plan to use the distraction of the explosives to surprise and overpower Sasuke's guards. The leader is still alive. What shall we do with him?" "We can wait a minute or two, bring him here," the Hokage said, wiping perspiration from her brow. Then she turned to quiet the throng. It was a more bitter defeat than the Dark Avenger had ever known. They had been discovered at the last minute, despite their numerous successes. He was being dragged before the Hokage, his few surviving supporters dead. He was dragged through the crowds and out into the open by the Junin that was holding him. He was pushed forward, and Tsunade gave him a disapproving look. So, she continued, you're the one who planned all this. The Dark Avenger shows himself at last. Did you chose the name, Dark Avenger? Or was it something the newspapers gave you? Well, Kabuto? Spitting at the Hokage's feet, the silver-haired medic Nin said, I have nothing to say to you. After shrugging, Tsunade said, okay, then, I'll deal with you as soon as we're done with Sasuke. As the Junin pulled him to one side, Kabuto clenched his teeth at his own powerlessness but was powerless to stop it. The crowds dispersed when Tsunade held up an arm. Alongside Shizune and 3 Anbu, the prisoner was at the opposite end of the field, his hands and feet chained. Stepping forward, Shizune steadied herself, inhaled deeply, and yelled, dead man walking. The Uchiha ignored the throngs of people on either side of him as the somber procession moved slowly forward. When he reached his destination, he saw Tsunade standing in a cleared area of the field. His Anbu guards made sure he was safe as they led him to a heavy log and chained him to it. Any last words? Tsunade asked as she approached him. Actually, I'd like a stick of Pocky, said a pair of dark eyes as they rose to gaze at her. Tsunade turned around and blinked, saying, okay, anyone have a box of Pocky? I do. Here, exclaimed a man in the crowd, and he threw it forward, which Shizune quickly caught before sprinting back to pass it to Tsunade. Good. The Hokage asked as he produced a stick and placed it in the prisoner's mouth. Tsunade gestured after he nodded, and Shizune jogged back a little as the people retreated and the guard Anbu moved aside. Tsunade had made the decision to carry out the execution herself, and after everyone had left the blast zone, she began her brief speech. You, Uchiha Sasuke, have been found, beyond a shadow of a doubt, to be guilty of high treason against Konoha. The punishment for this crime is death, and that punishment shall now be inflicted. Tsunade flashed through the seals of his hands. Bukakyu no Jutsu. She took a breath and exhaled a vast stream of flame that ate up the wooden log and the figure shackled to it. She spent a full 30 seconds using the technique. Haruno Sakura was crying, and she forced herself to watch, her tears reflecting the light, unnoticed in the crowds. As Kabuto watched the last remnants of Orochimaru's legacy burn in the fire, he struggled in vain against those in charge. Though for a different reason, Hitaki Kakashi was also paying close attention. This whole situation felt strange for some reason. After finishing the jutsu, Tsunade examined her handiwork. The log had been burned and the chains melted, leaving the still burning body on the ground. As she got closer to the body, she gestured for Shizune and the 3 Anbu to follow her. She needed to personally verify that the Uchiha was dead. Kakashi was aware of a problem. He was being triggered by something he was feeling and ought to be remembering, and all of his instincts were screaming at him. He grabbed his forehead protector and pulled it up. When Tsunade reached down to feel the Uchiha's pulse, 3 objects flew out of the sky and nearly struck the guard, Anbu, who sidestepped neatly. She glanced back in time to see the Anbu reach out and seize the battle fan and 2 sword handles that were embedded in the ground. Even as he began to shout a warning, Kakashi realized that it was too late, even though his eyes widened in horror at what his Sharingan revealed. Naruto, Temari, and Kisame ripped off their Anbu masks and spun outward, forming a circle around Tsunade and the body as one of the Anbu leapt over the handle of his sword to kick Shizune's head sharply. The corpse was still burning as it rose up and said, "That hurt." Tsunade felt her wrist suddenly in an iron grip and looked down in horror. Tsunade could only utter one word as the not.so. Dead body's eyes met hers. Mangekyu, from Uchiha Itachi's diary entry number 465. The execution is scheduled for 69 hours from now. I experience a wide range of emotions, despite what many people would say. I've experienced anger, joy, sadness, envy, regret, and lust. However, in my current circumstance, I am unable to articulate my feelings. Maybe the only way I can make sense of it is to explain my stance as simply as possible so you can make your own judgments. Right now, I'm in a place I don't want to be, and 3 other people share my distaste. We are surrounded by potential enemies, and since we are in the center of a big village, there are a lot of them. I've brought us here to save a person who will almost certainly attempt to kill me and or my friends at least once or twice while we're doing it, all the while fending off an army of shinobi who will be furious with us. For years, people have been calling me crazy, and it's only now that I'm beginning to think maybe they're right. Entry number 466. There are just 44 hours remaining. I find that the closer the rescue attempt gets, the more I feel the need to write down my thoughts, and I'm not stupid enough to fool myself about why. There is a very real chance that I will die during this mission. I'll give you my life philosophy right away because, strangely enough, I feel like the needle leaves at least a piece of me behind if that occurs. The human race's infatuation with why is what I find most puzzling. I've noticed that people frequently focus more on the motivation behind an action than the actual action taken. My claim to fame, the so-called Uchiha massacre, is a prime example of this theory. Suppose, for hypothetical purposes, that I exterminated my pitiful clan for honorable reasons. It's hypothetical because it's not true. A member of the Uchiha clan used to kill an average of 12 people in their lifetime due to the advantage of our Sharingan. Let's assume that every person I killed would have killed an average of 6 people if they had lived, in order to account for the elderly and middle-aged shinobi who have already killed a number of people and the infants who haven't killed anyone. Based on our calculations thus far, I have saved 235 lives by killing exactly 47 people that day. An additional 11 perished from friendly fire. Adding to this idea, the majority of the people I kill, even now, are big, naive, and violent people who have a tendency to act irrationally. Since I eliminated those who would have killed them, there are likely hundreds more people alive today, so one could see it as my doing the world a favor. People would have a very different opinion of me if saving lives had been my goal from the beginning. In actuality, I killed the stupid clan I was born into in order to test both myself and them. They died because I thought they were lacking. Today, I kill people because they irritate me, not because they are bad, rude, or unfair. Coincidentally, these characteristics are frequently present in the same individuals. From a statistical perspective, I have spent my entire life saving lives and doing inadvertent good. I should receive a medal if my actions were evaluated solely based on my performance. The problem is that people only consider why I killed the person, they don't consider the unanticipated advantages of their deaths. That way of thinking suggests that the outcome of an event is different because of the intentions that preceded it, which is an absolutely ridiculous notion. I don't really care if they think poorly of me, but it's astounding. I only have to look at the legal system, where murder and manslaughter are treated differently, as though accidentally killing someone makes them less dead than intentionally killing them. This amazing self-delusion serves to shield the populace from the reality that, on some level, everyone knows that death is death and that killing is killing. Regardless of the why, since this would imply that the third Hokage was the same kind of person as Orochimaru, a shinobi's brain cannot accept it. The snake and the third had likely killed roughly the same number of people when they passed away, which is an intriguing irony. How people like me can coexist has been the subject of endless speculation, and the simple answer is this. Morality is a personal experience. Justifiable and unjustifiable are arbitrary. Being wise or foolish is a personal choice. Strength, however, is not. I just do what I want to do, without making up flimsy excuses or immersing myself in the rationale of why this or that was done. My desire for greater power stems from the fact that it enables me to live this way, beyond the confines of society. Since I don't fully understand the words I've written, I don't expect anyone else to either. However, I hope my ideas are at least remembered, even if the person reading this rejects them as crazy, which you will unavoidably do. Itachi took a seat back and read his latest post again. Even if he was only writing in a diary, it was unusual of him to be so overt. For a man who lived a life of secrets, honesty was difficult. What he had said in his second last sentence was true, he thought. He had sat down with the intention of trying to write down his thoughts, but he wasn't entirely sure what had come out. With a snap, he shut the little black book and slipped it into his pocket before getting up from his bench and extending his shoulders. He had been putting off writing for a long time, and he suspected that he was running late. After gathering the few possessions he had brought, he walked confidently out of the park and into the streets of Konoha. Tamari looked around anxiously as she leaned against a lamppost. When Itachi arrived 15 minutes late, she briefly questioned whether anyone had noticed him. The moment this thought occurred, it was discarded because, even if Itachi had been identified, it would have been a fierce battle to defeat, and the morning had been calm. She continued to worry despite it, though. She saw him turn the corner 2 blocks away just as she was ready to leave without him. After a minute, Tamari began to move with the crowds in the streets, like another drop of water in a stream, as Itachi was just passing her. They were bouncing through the forest a few minutes later. Because Naruto was well known in Konoha and Kisame was just amusing, it was decided that they would remain in the camp. This indicated that Tamari and Itachi had gathered information about Sasuke's execution for the better part of a day. One could spend hours listening to the same rumors and learn nearly nothing of value, making it a mind-numbing activity because most people knew the same things. It goes without saying that both shinobi were eager to unwind after a day of endless gossip. Itachi halted only a few feet from the camp's edge and abruptly took Temari's arm, saying, "Look." It took Temari a moment to notice the wire hidden in the grass. "Naruto set traps?" she asked. "Kisame. Even I nearly missed the wire, and Naruto isn't that good at being subtle," Itachi said, shaking his head. After cautiously crossing the wire and beginning to move toward the tents, both of them felt a tug at their legs. "Oh, crap," Temari said, looking down. Itachi and Temari watched in a sort of trance as a massive log sprang out of the upper foliage, missing them by over 10 feet. They heard the log hit something with a thump. Click, and followed it with their eyes as it swung into the brush to their left. Itachi was a little alarmed by the click, but the thump was normal. Since the log had clearly set off another trap, 5 large bolts were fired into the air. However, none of the bolts appeared to be aimed at the location where Temari and Itachi had first set off the tripwire. But Itachi heard more of that mechanical click as they all landed. This continued for another 20 seconds, and it appeared that every kind of trap known to man had been installed in a few hundred square feet of forest, each one designed to set off the others. 3 kunai traps, each with an explosive tag, were set off as the grand finale. They were positioned so that they struck a tree trunk 3 times. After a big explosion, the tree began to slowly topple in the direction of Temari and Itachi, who moved aside to let it fall between them. One more click was made. He was hanging upside down after the first trip wire he had so carefully stepped over was triggered by the falling tree. Itachi was not amused, of course. Sadly, it appeared that everyone else was. While Naruto and Kisame came out of one of the tents laughing freely, Temari was at least trying not to laugh. Itachi cut himself without a word, landing on his feet with all the grace of a cat, determined to keep his dignity intact. He examined himself slowly, smoothing out all the wrinkles and straightening out all the hairs, then stretched his shoulders languidly, inhaled deeply, and activated the glare. Neither his Sharingan nor any fear stimuli were used for the glare. In actuality, the glare worked so well because it demonstrated to others his terrifying potential even in the absence of his genjutsu and ninjutsu. The words, "Now that you've alerted every shinobi within 10 miles as to our presence, I suggest you get ready to go. You will explain this incident as we travel," came out of his positively glacial voice. Naruto was jokingly recounting what had happened that morning as the 4 of them bounced through the treetops. Rewind, flashback. Kisame gazed at the heavens. Naruto raised his gaze to the heavens. They were disinterested, incredibly bored. "You know what's fun? Dominoes are fun," Naruto said abruptly as he sat up. The words, "Oh good, I'll pull some out of my ass and we can set them up," were rolled out by Kisame. "A tad sarcastic, are we? Didn't you ever set up huge patterns of dominoes to knock over?" "Why would I want to do something like that?" the shark man snorted. "Because it's fun, seeing if you can line everything up perfectly. As I mentioned before, we don't exactly have any dominoes." "Nay, Kisame. Isn't it possible to set a trap to trigger another trap?" was Naruto's thought as soon as he heard these words. "Why yes, it's quite a common tactic, actually," Kisame said, a smile slowly dividing his blue face. End of flashback. Naruto laughed at the recollection. "So, as I'm sure you've guessed, things just kind of snowballed at that point, and soon we were using up all our trap kits." Itachi resisted the impulse to begin pulling at his hair as they moved on from their previous campsite. A bunch of chunin leaves fell to the ground back at the campsite. The leader scratched his head in confusion. It appeared that a few hundred square feet of woodland had been used to set off every kind of trap known to man. It would take weeks to resolve this, he moaned. They shared information while sitting around a campfire later that evening. "Okay, people, we have a few major problems. We need to get in while remaining undetected, stop my stupid brother from being fried, and get out with everyone still possessing all their body parts," said Itachi, the mission's fictitious leader. Naruto paused for a moment. "Getting in shouldn't be a problem. The village doesn't have the resources to guard all the walls, but the execution stage will be packed with Anbu, so we'll need to make our move before the execution itself." Itachi raised his hand. "Yes and no, I have an idea that's just crazy enough to work, but it doesn't account for the third problem of how to escape." "Okay, so it goes like this. The first thing we would need to do would be to nab 4 Anbu and take their uniforms, thus allowing us to enter into Sasuke's cell. Since any discrepancy in the number of people coming and going would be immediately noticed, I will take my brother's place," Itachi said, realizing that everyone was simply staring at him expectantly. Kisame raised his hand. "Wait a sec, here, Itachi. Even assuming we could pull off the deception, How is you being dead better than your brother being dead? I'm not planning on dying, Kisame. Since it's death by fire jutsu, I can use Amaterasu to protect myself from the flames, Itachi said, exasperating once more how his normally perceptive partner could occasionally be so dim-witted. Correct me if I'm way off base here, but wouldn't you still then be surrounded by an army of shinobi? Temari asked, raising her hand as she did so. Well, yes. But since the Hokage will have to confirm the death herself, I should be able to take her as a hostage. Itachi grabbed Naruto's wrist as he began to move, saying, okay, don't need to raise your hand, just talk. The child sheepishly lowered his arm. Even assuming you managed to take Tsunade hostage, the stalemate wouldn't last for long. Konoha would quickly organize a strategic attack, and even you can't hold back a village. I know, that part is still a problem, Itachi said, scratching his head. For the first time in a long time, Naruto sensed a stirring in the back of his mind. Give me a second, guys, the bastard fox wants to chat. Would I want? Naruto asked himself as he let his thoughts drift into the dreamscape. The chibi-fox was grinning broadly. I've been doing a little eavesdropping on your conversation, and I know of a way to solve your problem, brat, or rather, the Uchiha's problem. How exactly could you help solve our problem? Was Naruto's skeptical response, which was the same way he responded to everything the fox said. The chibi. Fox's smile turned evil, which, it should be said, was rather strange given his diminutive size. What would you say to completely immobilizing all of Konoha for 15 minutes? If I believed that was possible, which I don't, I would say. What would you want in return? Nothing, brat, this is personal. I just want to see the look on the Hokage's face when the lot of you walk out from under her helpless nose. Okay, I can see you wanting revenge, but I still don't understand how you could immobilize that many people. Okay, the fox modified, maybe not all of Konoha, but all the shinobi at least. And also, note I didn't say I was the one who would do this. I just said there was a way to do it. And who other than you would have even near enough power to pull off that kind of jutsu? Naruto asked, sensing that something was amiss. A total of 10 minutes later. That's insane, Temari said, shaking her head. I think it sounds fun, was Kisami's expression as a child with a new toy. We would all be betting our lives on this, but I think it's our best shot, Itachi said, tapping a kunai with his finger. You are all nuts, Temari said, continuing the head, shaking gesture. Okay, that's 3 yes votes, and 1 you're all crazy vote. We're going for it, Naruto said after tallying the votes. Are you going to meet him tonight? Asked the Uchiha, glancing at the rising moon. Naruto raised his eyebrows. Kyuubi said I should be well rested. Apparently any mistake or oversight while talking to him might get me eaten. Amused by the thought of Naruto being devoured, Kisame remarked, then I'm guessing that we should probably get to bed soon. Naruto said, probably, as he nodded. Remind me again why I put up with you fruitcakes and your ideas? Temari asked, rubbing her head. With a chin rub, Naruto said, our devilish good looks? With a tilt of his head, Itachi asked, our razor-sharp wit? Our masterful culinary ability? Kisame asked, holding up a hot dog he had been preparing over the fire. The question was rhetorical. The sand girl said, fighting the impulse to choke something. Nay, Itachi, could you play something? Naruto asked as he began getting ready for bed after they all watched her stomp out of the camp. As Kisame ate his hot dog and Naruto fell asleep, the Uchiha nodded silently and pulled out his guitar, playing a calming tune. Temari returned to camp late that night and slipped into her sleeping bag as quietly as she could. As she watched Naruto's bag change and his head appear, she felt proud of her cunning. Dryly, that was a long walk, he said. I had to blow off some steam. It bothers me when you don't take my concerns seriously. We're all concerned, but Itachi was right, there's no other options. We either have to try using Kyuubi's idea or let Sasuke die, and the latter is not an option. I owe Itachi at least that much. But still, then how about you come with me tomorrow? Then you can judge for yourself whether this will work. You want me to go with you? Temari appeared even more agitated. Yeah, why not? Temari was aware that the majority of the countless reasons for not doing so were illogical. She had never been one to back down, but the basic idea troubled her. She said resolutely, all right, then, I will. 3 hours before the execution, next morning. After inhaling deeply, Naruto swung his sword against a cliff wall and watched as it sank, creating a black portal. Ready? He asked, turning to face Temari. They entered together after she gave a shaky nod. Tamari briefly felt as though she was submerged in cold water, but that feeling vanished, leaving her completely dry and in complete darkness. Naruto was the only thing she could see, and that was only because of his breathing, which she noticed irritably was much more relaxed than her own. As though led by another sense, Naruto began to move, and she silently followed. Tamari discovered that her perception of time was distorted after they walked for what might have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. Naruto stopped moving, which was the first indication that they had arrived at their destination, but she soon sensed a much more dreadful presence. "I am Fushicho Naruto, and have come to seek aid. I humbly ask the name of the one who stands before me," Naruto said, breaking the silence for the first time since they entered through the black portal. When Tamari heard what she thought was the rustle of a chain, she realized that a tiny bit of light was now coming from somewhere. Despite her instincts telling her to run, she resisted. A canine figure towered over them, the light emanating from its red eyes. The great beast was completely shackled, preventing it from moving much in any direction, but its body seemed to be composed of nothing but dark blue smoke. 5 of the 8 pegs that surrounded the creature were chained, and 3 more hung loose, clearly having been connected to the other 3. The pegs were embedded in the ground. The demon studied the 2 humans, and the humans studied the demon. When it did speak, it had a deep, resonant voice. "Never have I met a human who was so polite, and you are brave to enter a place like this, so let it be known that the greater demon Fenrir will hear your request. I am in need of a binding jutsu large enough to restrain a full army, and was told the only place I would find one capable of such a feat was here," Naruto said, slowly raising his eyes to meet the restrained demon's gaze. As it appeared, the boy was cautious to speak in a neutral and courteous tone because he thought that this specific monster might find binding jutsus to be a bit of a sore spot. "Ah, one could say I have a certain affinity for sealing and binding techniques. I have had, after all, over 2,000 years in which study the most powerful of them." 2,000 years, shouted Tamari and Naruto. "Yes indeed, little ones, I was defeated exactly 2,378 years ago, my physical body destroyed, and my spirit sealed in this pocket dimension. The jutsu was so powerful, 8 people gave their lives to imprison me, each one of them using their very essence to form the chains and attach them to my soul. No sealing technique since could begin to compare, but it was lost sometime around 1,200 years ago." Tamari's fear was turning into fascination, and Naruto nearly forgot she was there until she said, "But why would they go to so much trouble to seal you? Of all the demons I've met, you're by far the nicest." Centuries of imprisonment tend to change one's outlook on life. "Before I was sealed, I was no different than the 9-tailed whelp, who was the one who sent you here, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen him in 400 years, but his smell is still the same." The great wolf shook with laughter, his semi-solid form straining at his bonds. Even though Tamari was older than history, he was strangely comfortable with the demon. Naruto also liked Fenrir because he supported anyone who could call the Kyuubi a whelp and get away with it. "It's true," Naruto replied, "that the Kyuubi sent me here, but he gave no indication of what's involved with getting your aid, what I would need to do or what your help would cost me." "Well," replied the demon, "the first part is easy. I can handle most of the work, but you need to weaken space so I can manifest beyond my pocket dimension. As for what my help costs, it is its own reward, as one of my chains will break." Naturally, this made Naruto notice that 3 of the chains were hanging loosely from Fenrir's body while the other 5 were still fastened to the ground's pegs. "How could I break something you can't?" he asked. Grumbled Fenrir, "The seal that holds me was cleverly designed. It was decided by the Council of 8 that there might come a day when my help would be needed, so to account for this, every time I help a human who requires it, one of my chains will break. Think of me as a prisoner whose sentence is reduced for doing community service." "Oh, so all I need to do is open a gate when the time comes?" "Not so fast, little man. I haven't actually agreed to anything yet. Nothing annoys me more than rudeness, and you have done something very rude." The boy nearly struck himself in the head after frantically picking his brain to see what it might be. "I have been remiss, great one. I am delighted to introduce my companion, Sabaku no Tamari," he said, grabbing Tamari's arm and drawing her down into a bow with him. "Much better. I was worried for a second. I once had a nut job bring a girl here who he was going to use as a virgin sacrifice. He seemed perfectly normal until he started yelling about how he would spill blood to appease the ravenous hunger of the demon, in other words, me. I squashed him, which counted as helping the girl, so I broke a chain and ridded the world of an ass. You thought I was planning to use Tamari as a sacrifice? Nah, it just makes a good story. You didn't strike me as the type of human who would waste such a cute girl." The compliment made Tamari flush. For a huge blue smoke wolf, Fenrir was pretty endearing. Speaking of which, I was hoping that you might be able to do me a little favor, Tamari-san. Tamari was flattered and asked, what can I do to help? While Naruto was being ignored and was having a little pout. Kisame and Itachi gazed at the dark portal. If you had to guess, Itachi, how long would you say they've been in there? About an hour and a half so far, so what do you feel like doing while we wait, then? I don't know, maybe we could play I Spy or something. I Spy? Kisame asked, glancing sideways at his partner. Yeah, the game. You know, where you say, I spy with my little eye something that is in a color, then the other person has to try and figure out what the thing is. I know how to play, but why of all things would you think of that? Why not train or something? Itachi sighed, well, I Spy just struck me as the kind of thing people would do for long periods of time. Sometimes, I worry about you, Itachi. Fenrir, the wolf demon, was ecstatic at that very moment. Yeah, right there, wait, a little higher. Tamari climbed a little higher on his neck and giggled. The demon appeared to be nothing more than a blue haze, but it was actually fairly solid and felt like a giant sponge when climbed on top of him. It was enjoyable, but she had no idea how long she had been massaging the demon's shoulders. Ooh, yes, scratch the ears. Naruto was training far below, jumping from one chain to another while utilizing the demon's interlocking system of chains, which resembled a jungle gym. We really need to get going soon, he said as he swung around Fenrir's back leg on one of the loose chains and released his hold, soaring through the air before landing and balancing coolly on the demon's back. Do we have to? Asked Tamari as she raised her head from massaging her ears. Yes, sadly, your friend is correct. You have little time left, but I shall be there when my aid is needed. Tamari leapt from the wolf's back to the ground after sliding off his neck. Rubbing the demon's neck had given her a strange sense of power, as if she could feel a powerful entity respond to her every action. However, Naruto was correct, it was time to leave. I spy with my little eye, something that is red. Kisami's gaze carefully scanned the area, not much of it was red. Huh. The clouds on my Akatsuki cloak. Yes, that's correct, Itachi said, squinting his eyes. Assuming Kisame wouldn't be intelligent enough to look at himself, the Uchiha had taken off his cloak. Now it was the turn of the Shark Man. I spy with my little eye, something that is, Naruto? A few seconds after the aforementioned boy exited the portal, Tamari appeared abnormally joyful. Where in the 9 layers of hell have you two been? Itachi scowled. Giving a greater demon a massage, but that's beside the point. He agreed to help us, all Naruto needs to do is perform some jutsu that will weaken space enough for Fenrir to manifest from his prison dimension. The gate was closing and Seirei Kurite was coming out as Tamari was talking excitedly. As soon as Naruto grasped his sword's handle, he sensed the Kyuubi's unhappiness. The boy only realized now that Kyuubi had been keeping the portal open the entire time because it had been open the entire time. Naruto decided to treat the fox with kindness for the time being. Kisame said, so then, we ready to go kick some ass? Naruto replied, yeah, we need to move out soon, since security will be insane the last few hours, we need to perform the switch ASAP. There are 16 hours left before the execution. Naruto observed how the Anbu uniform stretched to fit his body as he carefully put it on. After securing the various pieces of armor, he looked at the mask. Given that uniforms were distributed according to size, his appeared to have been based on a bird of some kind. Naruto was in the hotel room with Itachi, who was exhausted from defeating a 4-man Anbu team with a powerful genjutsu, and Kisame, who was currently making fun of himself by positioning the team's unconscious members in awkward positions on the bed. Tamari was changing in the restroom, and Itachi was getting dressed next to Naruto. So far, their plan had gone nearly perfectly. They had identified the Anbu who were tasked with feeding Sasuke, and after the team dispersed and went home, Itachi caught each of them in a potent genjutsu and gave them enough sedative to keep them asleep for 3 days. Naruto had asked that there be as little killing as possible, so it was a little bit of a hassle. Although it was mentioned that the Anbu might be missed at home, Itachi had reassured the others that it was normal for an Anbu to abruptly disappear for days at a time. After clamping his last armguard into position, Naruto turned around and started laughing. Since all of the Anbu had been left in their underwear, Kisame had managed to arrange them so that none of them could be seen and that anyone entering the room would instantly assume something inappropriate and wrong. As Naruto and Kisame marveled at the Shark Man's creation, Itachi simply rolled his eyes and completed fastening his own armor. After a few minutes, Kisame was also dressed in uniform, and Naruto and Itachi assisted him in covering all of his skin because it would be unfavorable for him to be identified because of his unusual skin tone. All three shinobi were unaware that Temari had not yet left the restroom until Itachi finished the disguise by pulling the hood up over Kisame's head. "What are you doing in there? We have to go," said Naruto as he approached and knocked. The bathroom door opened slowly as the doorknob turned slowly. Reactions were mixed when Temari reluctantly entered the main room. Kisame whistled, Itachi simply arched an eyebrow, and Naruto took on a hue typically associated with tomatoes. No one had anticipated a problem because all of the Anbu they had captured were men and their uniforms were stretchy. Temari did fit into the uniform she had selected, and it looked good on her curves. She thought it was a little too nice. "Do I really have to wear this?" After Kisame nodded with a slightly lecherous grin and Naruto simply stared at her, she turned to Itachi, who gave it some thought. "I really think that one would fit you the best, Temari-san. You are the smallest, so I doubt any of us could even fit into that uniform." "But, I'm really not comfortable," glaring up, Naruto said, "You look fine." Temari decided that she could tolerate the restrictive uniform, if only for the benefit of the Uchiha brat. After receiving Naruto's approval, she could feel eyes on her as she began to strap on her armor, making it harder to keep this resolve. They were all still staring at her when she looked up again. She yelled, "Go do something else and let a girl get dressed," and they all, including Itachi, leapt and began preparing for the conversation. There are 12 hours until the execution. The Junin leader's team was on guard duty, and the four Nukenin walked up to him in perfect unison after sliding their earpieces into position. Itachi was chosen to speak since he was the only one of them to have ever been Lee Fanbu. "We're here for the scheduled prisoner checkup." Itachi had explained the strange law that Konoha could not execute a sick person, so he would have a check. Up precisely 12 hours prior to the execution. The Nukenin had arrived 20 minutes ahead of Shizun's scheduled arrival and would have to bluff their way through the checkup. According to the schedule Itachi had removed from the man wearing his armor. With a bored expression, the guard said, "Shizun Sama is to perform that task." Itachi's best, Anbu, voice was cool and collected, with a hint of menace. "The Hokage has ordered us to perform this task so as to relieve Shizun Sama of part of her heavy workload." After giving Itachi a close inspection, the guard shrugged and said, "All right, let's go through the chakra sensor." Itachi had explained to them that, although it was only a basic ring 10 feet high, passing through it would trigger an alarm if anyone molded any chakra at all. Even the weakest genjutsu or any bunshins in their group would be detected by the device. Chakra sensors were only utilized for the highest level of security because they were scarce and their production was unknown. "You people can go do your thing, but Shizun Sama will probably redo it anyway," the Junin said with a nod after they had all gone through. After overcoming the first challenge, the four of them resisted the impulse to start running as they approached the location where Sasuke was being held. Since it was just a regular door and a regular cell when it was opened, their arrival was actually rather unimpressive. Unless its occupant is restrained. There were four figures all around him, and Sasuke blinked and looked up drowsily, before one of them leaned close to his ear and said, "Listen up, bastard, we can get you out of here, but you'll need to stay cool." He assumed it was just another routine visit. Sasuke recognized the voice as Naruto's, but he was unable to react and instead just hung limply in a daze as he was soon unbound and on the ground. Itachi had been rapidly taking off his clothes during this time, so when Sasuke finally woke up, the first thing he noticed was his brother wearing only his underwear. "What are you doing here?" Sasuke glared, lacking the energy to deliver a full-fledged angsty speech. Itachi murmured, "Saving your ungrateful ass. Now get up and get undressed or I'll do it for you." Once more sitting in a semi-stunned state, Sasuke discovered that although his mind was otherwise busy, his body was complying and beginning to undress. Had Itachi arrived to rescue him? Itachi came to save Sasuke, despite the fact that he had devoted subjects from the sound, friends from the academy, and teachers who genuinely cared about him. Furthermore, it appeared that Itachi was going to put himself in danger. The picture of Itachi that Sasuke had in his mind did not fit this reality. Before long, Sasuke was also wearing his underwear. Naruto assisted him in donning the Anbu uniform his brother had been wearing, while Itachi hastily put Sasuke's clothes on and Kisame began strapping the older Uchiha against the wall. The conversation was over in a matter of minutes, and hardly anyone would ever be able to distinguish between the two brothers. As the years went by, Sasuke's face thinned and he grew taller, more like his brother. Before anyone could respond, Naruto snatched a kunai from his holster and yanked Itachi's hair out of its customary ponytail. Then, with a single swift motion, he trimmed it to resemble Sasuke's mid-length mop, snatching the extra hair and stuffing it into his pocket. They both knew it had to be done, but Itachi gave him a glare. Naruto took Sasuke by the arm and pulled him from the room, Temari and Kisame trailing closely behind, because he wanted to get him out of there before he regained consciousness and attempted to murder the now largely defenseless Itachi. Listen, we are a group of Anbu who have just finished inspecting the health of Uchiha Sasuke, and we found him to be in perfect health. Got it? Naruto whispered into Sasuke's ear once more after they were outside. After Sasuke gave a slow nod, the four of them strode back out of the prison with a purpose until they ran into the guard once more. The statement, "Everything is in order, and there are no complications," was Naruto's first move this time. "I figured as much," the Junin shrugged once more. The ex-prisoner and Nukanen then disappeared, bouncing from building to building. Naruto led them to a hotel far from where they had left the sleeping Anbu, where they gathered their weapons before continuing on to another hotel. Sasuke spent the first few minutes simply analyzing each face because he knew them all, and Naruto only signaled for everyone to take off their masks once they were once more safely inside the confines of a private room. Kisame was expected given Itachi's presence, and Naruto was recognizable by voice, but the Uchiha was unable to determine Gaara's sister's purpose in this place. The other three simply allowed him to continue searching for a while. The words, "I would like it if someone would tell me what's going on here," were uttered by Sasuke in a low, carefully considered voice. Sighing, "Very long story, which you will hear eventually. Right now, we need to sleep, because we have a major mission tomorrow and unlike you have been busy working all day. If you can't sleep, there should be some reading material in your left pocket." Without bothering to remove his shoes, Naruto flopped down on his bed after leaning his sword against the wall. Although it took them a little longer, Kisame and Temari were soon crawling into their first comfortable beds in a long time. "How do you know I won't escape?" Sasuke asked, sitting in a corner chair, watching everyone try to fall asleep. "Believe me, you won't," Naruto said, opening one eye. After 30 minutes of sitting quietly, Sasuke heard snoring and slowly made his way to the window. The words, "I told you, stupid bastard, don't even bother," were spoken to him as he was ready to jump out. The fox boy had moved, but Sasuke had not heard it. After guiding Sasuke back to his chair by the shoulder, Naruto was soon snoring contentedly once more, letting Sasuke sit and pout, which was his favorite activity. The Uchiha reluctantly took out what Naruto had referred to as reading material from his pocket after he had been moping for another 20 minutes. It appeared to be a typical leather-bound notebook, and Sasuke was intrigued as he opened it and looked inside the cover. The personal diary of Uchiha Ryusuke Itachi. Strangely, he didn't realize Itachi had a middle name at first. It was the sort of information one would anticipate learning about one's brother. Sasuke felt he had failed twice because it was the kind of information one would expect to learn about someone they had dedicated their lives to killing. After this rather arbitrary thought process had passed through his mind, he took a moment to reflect before turning to the first page. Sasuke began reading because he had nothing better to do and because he believed that anything he discovered about Itachi would benefit him. Naruto pretended to sleep as he lay in bed. 10 feet away, he could hear Temari snoring softly, and he allowed his mind to wander to the sand girl. He became aware that he and Temari had actually not spent any time together between the rush that had followed the news of Sasuke's capture and the arrival of Kisame and Itachi. Actually, it had been nearly 3 weeks since the incident on the rooftop that he and Temari had a meaningful conversation without one of the Akatsuki present. He was disturbed by this, and upon reflection found that he had strangely adapted to Temari's presence. He lost himself in the past, recalling the moments when she glared, when she smiled, when she threatened to hurt him. He recalled the threats with fondness, as they were a sort of joke between them, with Temari having the same chance of defeating Naruto and Seirei Kurite as Neji. Contest for personality. But when she smiled, Naruto enjoyed it the most out of everything. Because it didn't happen often, it was even more valuable. The warmth of memory engulfed him, but he was startled out of it as he opened his eyes. Naruto became aware that he had a serious crush on Temari of the Sand at that very moment. Sasuke was still reading the last diary entry at the break of dawn the following day. He had combed through all of his brother's experiences and ideas in 5 hours, and as his eyes passed over the last section, he felt a heavy burden fall upon him. Sasuke was afraid of how much sense Itachi made if he stepped back from his bigotry and hatred. He began reading with the intention of learning more about his mysterious older brother, but now he wished he knew less. After years of demonizing his brother, which Itachi had done nothing to change, Uchiha Sasuke now faced the greatest foe of his life while sitting in a hotel room with soon-to-be waking Nukenans all around him. The humanity of his brother had confronted him. Recognizing that his brother was human put them on equal footing, and although Sasuke still harbored a deep hatred for Itachi, he found that his once frenzied obsession was ebbing away with the morning dew. Sasuke was well aware that he was not one to lecture about morality. "Blah, it feels like I just got to sleep, what time is it?" said Naruto as he began to shift and slowly opened his eyes. With a glance out the window, Sasuke said, "About 9 a.m. Okay then, time to get out of bed. How was your night, by the way?" "I don't really know, I'll just say it was interesting and leave it at that." "We kinda need your help today, are you up for it?" Naruto smiled. The Uchiha sighed. "I am, at the very least, one who pays his debts. Besides, it wouldn't count for anything if Itachi dies because I was too weak to protect myself. That would contradict the point of killing him." "All right, then, the plan goes like this," Naruto said with a broader smile. 5 minutes prior to the execution. As the pink-haired girl carried a tray of food into his cell, Itachi looked up weary. He was aware from Naruto's tales that Sakura, the girl who had an infatuation with his brother, was the only possible candidate. As she unbound him and placed some food in front of him, he watched passively and began eating in silence. Itachi had to admit that he was irritated with his brother because, despite the fact that he enjoyed fried rice just as much as anyone else, it was a cliché to request it for a last meal. Water, too. Water. If Itachi had to choose one last meal, he would request a 30-ounce steak marinated in honey that was collected by 3 virgins on a full moon night from the hive atop a redwood. He would insist on escargot from water country combined with truffles from grass country as a side dish. To top it all off, he would insist on red wine that had been aged for at least 150 years. However, his brother had requested water and fried rice. Itachi felt a tug on what remained of his heartstrings, and only after a minute or two of mental complaining did he give his pink-haired guest much attention. "Thank you for this, Sakura," he said, looking up at her, determined to at least be courteous. The response he received was quite the opposite of what he had anticipated. She broke down in tears. "Don't thank me, Sasuke-kun. Not now." The older Uchiha decided she should witness the escape because it appeared to Itachi that the girl was even more disturbed than he had anticipated at the prospect of Sasuke's execution. "I have a request, one final thing I would like you to do for me," she said. "You know I'd do anything for you, Sasuke-kun," grinning and wiping away her tears. Looking up at his cell's roof, he said, "I want you to be there, at noon today. I want you to promise that, no matter what, you won't look away." Sakura nodded silently, unsure of what to say but unable to turn him down. Itachi didn't know what was causing it, but he couldn't help but smile when he thought about how happy he would be to see the girl in front of him when Sasuke made his escape. As he resumed his meal, he warned himself that if anyone ever found out, they might think he was a decent guy. Just 7 minutes prior to the execution, Itachi was surrounded by Naruto, Kisame, Temari, and Shizune as they awaited the signal to continue. He had 3 guards, in full Anbu uniform once more. Sasuke sat concealed in the trees at the edge of the training field where the execution was to occur, holding 3 enormous weapons in his arms and cursing the person who had determined that larger was better when it came to weapons. The village was rocked by explosions, but nobody left their posts. A few minutes later, Shizune saw the signal and began guiding the Nukenans through the crowds. The words, "Nay, Temari, I wanted to apologize for something," were picked up by the microphone as Naruto sub-vocalized into his communicator as they were walking. "Is this really the time? Yeah, I need to say this now. I know things have been awkward between us for a while, since the incident on the rooftop, and I'm not really good at this kind of thing." Naruto hesitated and paused for a while, "But I want to say I'm sorry for being so distant and that I really do like you a lot." Temari felt her face getting hot, so it was fortunate that she was wearing the mask. "I like you too, Naruto, but I really think we should talk about this later," she said. "Yeah, later," Naruto said, a little exhausted, saying that had required far more courage than he had anticipated. It should be mentioned at this point that Temari and Naruto had both forgotten a minor detail. Kisame could still hear everything they said because they were talking over their communicators. Beneath his mask, the shark man grinned evilly. He would have enough ammunition to taunt those two for the next 10 years if they made it through this. With the massive fireball descending on him, Itachi stood composedly, chewing his stick of Pocky. He used his Mangekyo Sharingan at the last second, encircling his body with Amaterasu's black flames. Although Itachi was shielded from the worst of the blast by his black flames, it was one of the most agonizing experiences of his life to keel over as the fire jutsu came to an end. As the Hokage drew closer, he made himself lie quietly and calmly. Then, just as she was ready to check his pulse, Itachi felt 3 impacts in the ground. He chuckled, just in time, stupid little brother. He caught hold of the Hokage's wrist as he opened his eyes and straightened up after hearing the commotion that was undoubtedly Naruto, Kisame, and Temari revealing themselves. That snarled, that hurt. Tsunade's eyes locked with Itachi's, and she could only manage one word. Mangekyo. Itachi was aware that he had just a few fractions of a second left before Tsunade snapped out of it and ripped him in 2 like wet tissue paper, but that was still a lot longer than he needed. The Hokage crumpled as Itachi gave her a savage chop to the neck just as her eyes were beginning to clear up. It seemed as though time had stopped entirely as the throng of onlookers attempted to comprehend what was happening, and the different shinobi were paralyzed by Itachi's casual holding of the unconscious Hokage, defying anyone to attack. While Naruto allowed his mind to drift into semi-awareness and gave the Kyuubi partial control, Temari and Kisame wasted no time in beginning separate sets of hand seals. Giving up his body voluntarily was strange because, although he was still conscious, he saw everything as though in a daze and was witnessing his own body perform actions that he had not instructed it to perform. If it had been less serious, he would have laughed at the feeling. I have to do 236 hand seals, and I need my ass covered, so no screw-ups, the Kyuubi said, smiling to himself and letting himself enjoy having a real body, even if only for a short while. His voice was a darker version of Naruto's. For a moment or two, all 3 were forming seals as Naruto's body began to move. Temari completed her jutsu first, and as soon as she began to open her fan, Naruto and Kisame retreated, still forming seals, to avoid the flames. Kei's Nenshu no Justu. She aimed high, as planned, so the superheated blast of air only skimmed the crowd, singing a few hairs and knocking a few people over. Nonetheless, it was enough to panic the populace. Chaos broke out in a matter of seconds, during which Kisame completed his Kirigakure no Jutsu seals. The ball was in the opponent's court, and the group huddled into a tighter circle as the fog rolled in. Itachi instantly assessed the situation, as he often did. The Uchiha predicted that it would take around a minute and a half for the jutsu to be finished because the Kyuubi was a little awkward using Naruto's. Though he still held the Hokage captive, he was well aware of how quickly the Anbu would mount a counter-offensive. Sasuke was struggling with his feelings up in the trees at the edge of the field that was covered in fog. He had initially intended to simply flee on his own as soon as he had thrown the weapons, but now he was experiencing guilt. It wasn't about any of his rescuers because Sasuke was certain that Itachi and Naruto would survive in one form or another. Rather, his attention was drawn to a white-haired medic nin who was being restrained beneath him. Even though it annoyed him, Kabuto had always been a faithful servant, and now he was in dire need and had no one else to turn to for assistance. Sasuke let out a sigh, turned on his Sharingan, and leapt from his branch. Without making a sound, he descended through the air, and as soon as he caught sight of the backs of 3 figures, he tensed up like a spring. The Junin felt him when he was just a few feet above them and began to look up, but he sprang into action, sending the right Junin reeling with a kick to the stomach and the left Junin back with a blow to the jaw. He hit the ground running even after this brief acrobatic performance, and Kabuto took a few steps behind him after realizing what had happened. Itachi hardly acknowledged them when they arrived at his place, but then he began to talk. Kyuubi needs another minute to finish his jutsu, and the Anbu will make an assault in 16 seconds. Temari will take the Hokage while Sasuke, Kisame and I deal with the Anbu. A little perplexed, Kabuto asked, "What do I?" "You," abruptly stated Itachi, "stay here and don't get in the way. Are there any problems with the plan?" "No." "Good." The blissfully unconscious Tsunade was literally dropped into Temari's hands, and she sensed a group of elite shinobi approaching shortly after. "Here they come." Kisame smiled as he hefted Samahata. "I'm shocked that I'm doing this," Sasuke said, glaring at his brother. "Naruto would rather we not kill people, but do what you must," Itachi said, pausing for a moment before yelling, "Go." They plunged into the fog. Now we have Kisame at bat. Kisame, submerged in fog, raised his sword with 2 hands, assumed a batter's stance, and said in an exaggerated announcer's voice. Swinging in response to a disturbance in the mist, he struck an Anbu in the chest, sending him flying back from his starting point. "That's a home run, folks. Let's see if he can do it again," the Shark Man said as he sank into his stance a second time. A second Anbu moved forward more cautiously a few moments later. His opponent danced just out of range as Kisame swung once more. The Anbu rushed forward, believing he had taken his opponent by surprise, only to discover he had misjudged how quickly Kisame could reverse his swings. Unknown to the other team, Kisame is a switch hitter. Another home run, the Shark Man said in his announcer's voice as the second Anbu found himself flying backwards. With extreme caution, the squad commander advanced through the fog toward Kisame's location, closely trailed by the other members of his team. He signaled to stop with a raised hand and walked the final few yards by himself, attempting to see the blue-skinned man through the fog. Kisame, who was only a few feet away, swung with all of his strength as the Anbu leader took another step forward. Kisame heard the sound of bodies colliding shortly after the Anbu was thrown backwards. A conked-out commander atop his swirly-eyed team caught his attention as he took a few steps. He laughed, "There it is, folks. Kisame scores a grand slam." Sasuke and Itachi faced their own Anbu elsewhere in the fog. The two brothers kept getting in each other's way, so things hadn't been going so well so far. Although their fighting techniques were similar, they differed just enough that their rhythms clashed. Sasuke's eyes darted to and fro as he landed beside his brother. They were encircled. Itachi said, "You know what our problem is, Sasuke," as he sensed the Anbu closing in. "What?" glared Sasuke. As he said, "We're focusing on our differences, rather than taking advantage of our similarities." Itachi's Mangekyo turned back to normal Sharingan language. "You can't be serious. I haven't done that exercise since I was 6 years old," said Sasuke, rolling his eyes as Itachi began tapping his foot to a quiet rhythm. When a kunai whizzed past Sasuke's head, he reluctantly began tapping along with his brother as Itachi's foot tapping grew more persistent. When they were young, they had been taught that synchronizing everything you did was the best way to fight someone. They had been instructed to accomplish this by tapping their feet in time just before battle to align their internal rhythms. Sasuke could feel his breathing and heartbeat alter to match his tapping foot as he concentrated on the beat, even though the Anbu was drawing near. As soon as he heard the tapping in his head, his foot stopped moving, and he could tell by the silence that Itachi had too. Now it felt like that beat in his head was driving every part of his body. Press, Sasuke and Itachi moved so they were facing each other. Press. The attack started as the mist swirled. Press while Itachi used an uppercut to send an Anbu flying. Sasuke threw a kunai into the air. Press as Sasuke and another Anbu traded blows, Itachi snatched the kunai out of the air. Press while Sasuke leapt into a spinning kick, Itachi spun low, dragging his kunai across his opponent's thigh muscles. Sasuke then kicked over his brother's head, sending another Anbu flying with broken ribs. Press. Itachi took one end of a coil of wire from his younger brother's pocket behind him, and Sasuke took the other end a moment later. Press. With the wire nearly taut between them, Itachi and Sasuke ran away from one another. Press. Sasuke ran in a wide circle, bending left and Itachi right. Press. The two brothers moved past one another, creating a rapidly constricting wire loop. Press. Unwilling to allow their victims to escape, they both felt something catch at the same moment and accelerated. Press. They ran side by side until the wire was pulled as taut as it would go, then circled back to meet in the center. 4 Anbu were trapped in the razor sharp wire in the mist and were attempting to break free. Press. Sasuke flashed through some seals after Itachi handed him his end. Press. Yorozudori, said Sasuke, holding both ends in his right hand. The wire was torn down as lightning arced over Sasuke's body. 10 feet away, Itachi could feel his hair stand on end as the wire crackled with energy for a few seconds. Sasuke dropped a still, smoking wire to the ground as the energy faded. "That is a jutsu I created to use on you," he said, panting. Itachi was quietly observing. "Yorozudori, 10,000 birds. I don't suppose there's any point to checking on our Anbu friends? With that much electricity going through them, they'll be out for at least a few days," said Sasuke, still gasping for air. Kakashi stood outside the mist, watching. The field was divided in two by what appeared to be a wall of white. There was complete silence on one side and widespread panic as Konoha residents fought to escape. Anbu had already sent 2 complete squads into the fog. The sounds of battle had been heard, followed by a powerful chakra surge, and now there was nothing. To make sure he hadn't missed any, Kyuubi had been mentally counting his seals as he went. 232, 233, 234, 235, 236, completed. Naruto, who had just begun to appreciate not having to command his body, was slammed back into control just in time to feel a wave of chakra emanate from Seirei Kurite, even though no jutsu name was called. Temari and Kabuto shivered beside him. Itachi, Sasuke, and Kisame sensed the wave instantly and hurried back to Naruto. The great chakra spread over the entire village in a matter of seconds before disappearing. Even though the chakra was gone, everyone in the village, shinobi and others alike, felt that something was amiss in the atmosphere. Over 100 shinobi were preparing a major assault outside the Wall of Mist. Numerous Junin and the majority of the village's Anbu were preparing and receiving hurried briefings. After a few more seconds of silence, a loud, unearthly howl echoed through the village, stopping all men, women, and children in their tracks. "It looks like our friend has made an appearance. We're in the clear, though I'm very tired right now," Naruto said, nearly collapsing with relief. Naruto moved slowly toward the edge of the mist, followed by Itachi, Kisame, Temari, Sasuke, and Kabuto. Shouts, screams, and the sounds of general mayhem began to fill their ears. They encountered a scene that no one would ever forget when they broke through the wall of white and came out into the sunlight. Konoha had been chained. They appeared to cover the entire city, ensnaring all of its residents in their annoying metal embrace as they grew out of the ground like a devil's garden. Kakashi himself struggled futilely against the chains that bound his arms and legs only 15 feet away. "Hello Naruto, come to visit?" the copy ninja asked, trying to appear indifferent as Naruto walked up to him. "Just here to pick up an old friend, Kakashi. We'll be gone soon enough." "We will be coming after you," the copy ninja said with a smile beneath his mask. "No, you won't, because right now, everyone here is at my mercy. I could kill anyone I wanted, but I'm not going to, and in exchange you are all going to leave me alone." Kakashi continued to smile as he asked, "And what, dare I ask, makes you think we'll agree to this deal?" "Simple. I did this jutsu once, and I can do it again. If I'm forced to use it a second time, I may not be so merciful." Naruto then strode past the copy ninja and navigated the crowds of shackled and enraged individuals. He walked resolutely forward, ignoring the threats, insults, and familiar faces. Temari, behind him, felt only mildly uneasy. She saw a few shinobi attempting to form hand seals or reach for weapons, but they were always stopped by the chains. Right now, she was battling the worry that one Anbu might get a jutsu off if Fenrir made even the slightest mistake. Itachi abruptly swerved to one side as they got closer to the field's edge, heading over to where he discovered a certain girl with pink hair crying and letting her tears fall from the chains holding her to the ground. "Hello. Sakura-san." All the shinobi around him quieted to try to hear what was happening, and Sakura's head snapped up in response to his voice. "Thank you for the meal and company," Itachi said, leaning in and whispering in her ear, ignoring the throng. Just as they were approaching the field's edge, Itachi retreated and jogged to join his friends. They were outside a tiny shop close to Konoha's edge. "How much longer?" Kisame asked. "Will this jutsu last?" "A while yet. Forming the chains is very tiring, but maintaining them takes very little chakra. Fenrir can probably keep it up for at least a few more hours," said Naruto, leaning against a wall and still exhausted. "In that case," Itachi replied, "I think we should stock up on supplies." Although most people were nodding, Naruto appeared to be struggling to stay upright, so Itachi took charge. "Naruto will rest here. The rest of you, grab whatever you think might be useful." Naruto then sat outside on a deserted street as they began the methodical looting of the store, or more accurately, what he believed to be an empty street. Naruto initially believed that the wind was merely stirring up dust, but he soon realized that a large amount of it was gathering. A moment later, he also recognized that the swirling material around him was actually sand rather than dust, and Naruto began to appear a little uneasy. The sand suddenly solidified into a compacted form. Suddenly, a solid figure reached out, caught Naruto by the neck, and raised him into the air. Naruto smiled, clearly nervous now, and said, "Gaara, nice to see you again." Although Naruto had experienced many challenging circumstances throughout his life, this one was undoubtedly close to the top of the list. Gaara held him tightly by the throat and seemed utterly unconcerned about it. "Hello there Naruto, it's been a while. I take it you're doing well?" "Not bad, though I'm feeling rather tired right now," Naruto said, trying to project a sense of indifference while still hanging in midair. The boy in the sand said, "That was quite a jutsu you did back there. Shukaku tells me it was to weaken the dimensional barriers, no small feat. I was quite impressed myself, as even I really didn't know exactly what the jutsu was going to do." At this point, Kabuto peered out of the store as the door opened. He was about to respond when he became aware of the Fox Boy's predicament. Is everything okay, Naruto-kun? He asked. Yeah, Gaara and I were just having a little chat, Naruto smiled in return. It looks to me like he's trying to kill you, said Kabuto, with a doubtful expression. Gaara sighed. If I was trying to kill him, he would be smothered in sand. I just want to make sure he doesn't run away. Okay then. Naruto, I wanted to know if you had any preference with regard to food? The medic.nin said, shaking his head. Naruto, not really, but thanks for asking, while still 2 feet off the ground and stroking his chin thoughtfully. Kabuto said, carry on then, and retreated inside the shop. After a few seconds of Gaara's silence, Naruto began to grow weary of waiting and said, you've made your point, so could you let me down now? No, the white-haired boy had a good idea there, so I'm currently considering strangling you and throwing your body down a very deep well. I think the idea merits a few more minutes of thought. Do I have any input into this decision? Your input? Was kidnapping my sister and then disappearing? Naruto gave this some thought. The fox boy wanted to be cautious because he was only somewhat certain that Gaara was making a joke about the strangling thing, but Gaara did have a point. After a few more seconds of silence, Naruto collapsed, struck the ground, and inhaled deeply. So then seriously, what can I do for you? I would figure that you would ignore me and go see Temari, he said, getting up and rubbing himself off while leaning against the wall. I will see my sister in good time. Right now, you are going to tell me everything that has happened since you left Konoha. Leave anything out and we may go back to the strangling idea. Now, tiny gears were turning inside Naruto's head. The fox boy could only avoid telling Gaara something if he was reasonably certain Temari wouldn't tell her brother either, since the only way Gaara could verify or refute anything was to speak with Temari and compare their statements. That definition encompassed a wide range of items. Naruto then shared his story, which had been slightly altered. As he explained, he found that he could tell by Gaara's frown how he was responding. Gaara had a savage scowl on his face when he first described how Temari had technically been his prisoner, but when he got to the part about getting her a new weapon and teaching her new jutsus, the sandboy's expression turned neutral, and he even cracked a small smile. The two fell silent once more as Naruto finished, each absorbed in their own thoughts. We have a bit of a situation in here, Kabuto said as the store's door flew open and he peered out once more. I'm kind of busy right now, but tell me what the problem is, Naruto sighed in frustration. Sasuke and Itachi look like they're about to attack each other, said the white-haired nin, uneasy as he rubbed his head. After rolling his eyes, Naruto said, I would be worried if those two didn't look like they were about to kill each other. Have Kisame and Temari calm them down. Kabuto became more anxious. Kisame and Temari are already making wagers with regards to the winner, so I don't think they'll be much help in diffusing the situation. After a moment of gazing up at the sky, Naruto said, try making the offhand comment that you heard somewhere that the Byakugan was superior to the Sharingan, as if a metaphorical light bulb had suddenly appeared above his head. Kabuto quickly realized Naruto's plan and ducked back inside, leaving the fox boy to confront Gaara by himself once more. So, what do you think? He asked. It appears that under the circumstances you had no choice but to act as you did, so I can't blame you. I will also say that you appear to have done as well as you could to keep Temari safe and help her become stronger. I try my best, Naruto said, bowing slightly. So then, when are they going to be done in there? I'm not really sure, but it shouldn't be too much longer. What do we do until then? The words, it's been a while since we've fought, the last time was, if I recall, in the forest when you went all crazy, instantly lit up Naruto's eyes. After giving the sand boy a small smile, he let go of the sand and let it all fall to the ground. The sand armor that always encased his body disintegrated, exposing his skin as his gourd dissolved. You're tired right now, so using chakra wouldn't be fair. Besides, I haven't really had a chance to try this taijutsu I've been learning, Gaara said, smirking as she glanced at Seirei Kurite. Naruto continued to stare blankly. Okay then, if you want it that way. I could use an old-fashioned physical fight right about now, Naruto said, grabbing his sword and flinging it carelessly into the air. Kabuto found himself the target of a two-pronged attack inside the store. He was being given a detailed explanation by Itachi and Sasuke of all the reasons why the Sharingan was far more potent than the Byakugan. Unconsciously, the two brothers had developed a routine in which the other would take over and carry on the list whenever one of them needed to breathe. Temari had just finished packing her bag with the last few items when the store exploded, stopping all activity. Temari was only a few seconds behind Sasuke as he abruptly stopped speaking and ran for the door. Itachi, Kisame, and Kabuto calmly gathered their belongings and wandered around the outside, trusting that the younger generation would be able to handle any issues. With sand all over the place, the street appeared to be a miniature desert, but Sasuke's focus was instantly drawn to the ongoing grapple. There was a standoff between Naruto and Gaara in the center of the mini desert. Neither appeared to have an advantage as they exchanged rapid, light blows. Sasuke could see that Naruto was much more skilled at taijutsu, but his weariness made the difference. Despite using only the most basic taijutsu, Gaara was much more agile and energetic. Uchiha, who was young, shook his head. He would never normally have described Gaara as nimble, but it was clear that the Sandboy had been training. Despite noticing Sasuke's appearance, the two fighters ignored it because they were enjoying the fight so much. However, they took note of who trailed Sasuke out of the shop. When Temari came out into the light, she saw Naruto and Gaara frozen in the middle of a fight, the fox boy simply raising his leg for a roundhouse kick, and Gaara's fist an inch from Naruto's face. "What in the nine hells are you two doing?" she asked, inhaling deeply. The two felt compelled to go hide somewhere, but they were still stuck in their strange tableau. We were fighting." Naruto cleared his throat and resumed his normal standing. "Why, exactly?" Temari asked as a headache began to develop. This time, Gaara said, "For fun." Sasuke had to raise the question, what was it that exploded? After exchanging glances and shrugging, Naruto and Gaara turned to face one another. Gaara noticed something after a few seconds and directed everyone's attention there. Seirei Karaite was protruding from an electrical transformer a few hundred feet away, sparking happily. Gaara and Naruto came back into focus. Temari let out a sigh. "Why am I not shocked?" After her adrenaline rush subsided gradually, she jogged forward and unexpectedly lifted her younger brother off the ground and gave him a hug. "It's good to see you here, little brother, despite the mess," she said. "You should have been back in the sand by now, in my opinion." "Well," Gaara said, blushing a little, "I was sort of looking for you. You abruptly vanished." The words, "Yes, I suppose I did. Sorry about that," came out as she laughed nervously. "I'm afraid we have to leave soon," Itachi said as he came out with his bag and gazed up at the sky. "We will require as much time as possible." Temari nodded, letting go of her brother. "All right. I sincerely apologize, Gaara. I would really like to talk more, but the time." "You wouldn't think about going back to the sand, would you?" As she answered, a nervous part of Naruto listened in while he ran to get his weapon. "Part of me wants to, but we both know there's no place for me there. Furthermore, it would destroy ties with Konoha. You should probably keep the fact that you've met me a secret." "I guess," Gaara said, glancing at the ground. "Tell you what, we'll come visit sometime, since I'd like to see Kankuro too," she said, giving him another brief embrace. "Don't worry, I can take care of myself. Just return to the sand." "We must leave immediately," Itachi said, almost growling. With his sword in hand, Naruto nearly staggered back and said, "Itachi is correct. We'll be followed by all of Konoha." "You promised to visit, don't forget," Gaara said, grabbing his sister's wrist abruptly after nodding. "Oh, we'll be sure to. Just wait," Naruto said with a laugh. "We will engage in actual sparring the next time." 18 hours later. The camp had been hurriedly assembled, and its inhabitants were in a variety of emotional states. After the absurdly lengthy run, Sasuke and Temari were sound asleep. Naruto was feeling rejuvenated after being carried by Kisame for a few hours and was out establishing a perimeter, and Kabuto, Itachi, and the shark man mentioned earlier were going through the supplies. At the moment, Kabuto was searching through the duffel that Itachi had filled with a drop of sweat. Just Pocky and Tang seem to be in here. Was something wrong, Itachi-san? "No, I chose what I thought to be most important," was Itachi's pathetic attempt to appear innocent. After searching through another bag, Kisame flashed his trademark shark smile and said, "You know what I'm thinking right now." "Yes," Itachi said, squinting his eyes, "and this is not the time." Kabuto appeared perplexed, asking, What is it not the time for?" "It was time for an SCMS, as the shark man held up a ripe tomato. "SCMS?" the poor medic nin asked, looking even more perplexed. The words, "a special culinary munitions spar," were rolled out by Itachi. Kabuto attempted to interpret this. Splat, suddenly, Kabuto got it as tomato pieces fell from his face. Gripping, Itachi said, "Kisame, this isn't the..." Splat. Itachi, cool as ice, drew a dozen eggs from his bag, opened them, took 2 in each hand, whipped them at his partner, and drew the tomato away from his face. Kisame grabbed a bag of carrots and tore it open while he ducked and laughed. When the two Akatsuki clashed with different food groups, Kabuto was soon completely ignored. Up until Itachi produced his spinning sausage links, the Shark Man had figured out a successful way to use carrots as kunai. Kisami's pupils widened. Yes indeed, your sausage nunchaku are quite fearsome, but they are no match for the pickle of doom. Itachi snorted, the doomsday pickle? With a pickle, what will you do? Sneaking over to where Tamari was sleeping against the tree, Kisame reached into his duffel and took out a jar of pickles that appeared to Itachi to be just regular pickles. With a slow motion, he unscrewed the lid and pulled out one of the wet green vegetables. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the pickle smashed wetly into Temari's face from the side and flew through the air. Her eyes popped open, and she became acutely aware of her surroundings. Kisame shouted, Itachi! And hurriedly put his jar back in his bag. How could you have done that? Give a sleeping girl who isn't paying attention a pickle. Itachi took a step back as the still, drowsy Tamari glared sleepily at the Sharingan user and made a menacing guttural noise before beginning to rise. 10 minutes later, Naruto entered the camp and saw Itachi sprawled face down on the ground. Are you okay? Itachi muttered something that sounded somewhat like recognition. Naruto turned to Kisame, who was cleaning Samahata, after giving the prone Itachi a questioning glance. What happened to him? He mocked the pickle of doom, said the Shark Man with a sly smile. What? We had a special culinary munitions spar. Looking at the different food items scattered all over the place, Naruto asked, what specifically motivated you to do this? It's a strategy to reduce tension and encourage relationships outside of work between Akatsuki pairs. It's also a lot of fun. That's a matter of opinion, but I won't deny I've been known to participate once in a while, Itachi said, pushing himself up. On a more serious note, the perimeter is secure, but we still need to make decisions about our next course of action and what you two will do. Do you still recall that you disobeyed orders and are currently missing from the Akatsuki? Yeah, Kisame said, nodding, but I've been thinking of something lately that could help with that and a few other issues. The trick is that if certain people find out, it won't work, so we'd have to keep it under wraps. He turned to make sure Kabuto was still out of earshot as Naruto and Itachi gave him a questioning look. I think my idea will be best for Sasuke, but he probably won't agree with me on that, and if this is going to work, it has to be done tonight, he said. We're listening, Itachi said, nodding. Sasuke felt better than he had in weeks when he woke up the following morning. Things were going well, the sun was shining, and his life was no longer in imminent danger. However, he saw an error. Everything was gone except for 2 of the 4 food duffels and a plastic bag that contained something he couldn't identify. Where there should have been people, there were none. Where there should have been a camp, there were only 2 sleeping bags. This bothered him. After dragging himself out of bed, he went to kick Kabuto's sleeping bag. Who? What? Are we being attacked? No, but we're by ourselves. We seem to have been left behind. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, Kabuto looked around, noticing the same things that Sasuke had noticed moments earlier. What's in the plastic bag? Don't know. Haven't really examined anything yet. After saying this, Sasuke went over and opened the bag, which was filled with a lot of black cloth and an envelope. He took the envelope out and threw the bag to Kabuto, who started searching inside. After examining the exterior, which appeared to be normal, the Uchiha tore it open and unfolded the 2 sheets of paper inside. The first one said, "Congratulations, you've been promoted," with only a few lines in what Sasuke recognized as his brother's slightly scratchy writing. Sasuke turned to the second page, which was much longer, and shook his head. It read, "In the country of lightning, there is a lord named Mamoru Shinobu. He has an estate 113 miles east of the capital. He is to be killed. It will be made to look as though his wife killed him. The payment is 1,200,000 yen. It was clearly a mission assignment, but there was no indication of its origin. Sasuke glanced down at the first sheet and saw that something, resembling a map, was drawn on the back. Hey, Kabuto, come tell me what you make of this. Sasuke's eyes widened and he gave a, son of a bitch, when he heard no response. Kabuto held up 2 black cloaks with red clouds embroidered on them. Konoha had never been so chaotic since the Nine Tails attack. The Godem Hokage strode through the crowds. Her body leaned forward aggressively as if daring anyone to obstruct her path. People were running everywhere like chickens with their heads chopped off, and none of them really had a destination. She was heading to a place that was usually forgotten and ignored, which was bad because, even though it wasn't needed very often, there were times when it was, and this was one of those occasions. When she reached a small building on the town's west edge, she loudly knocked on the door and said, "Hanzo, come on down here." An elderly man grinned as he peered out the door after what seemed like an eternity, saying, "Ah, such a pleasant surprise, Tsunade-sama. You are fully aware of my purpose for being here, as well as my arrival. Do you have to go straight to business every time?" the elderly man asked, laughing and opening the door wider. "It's been years since we had a nice conversation." Tsunade followed the old man into his home and surveyed the racks and shelves that filled it. The oldest of scrolls and books were housed here, an information archive that no one had wanted but Hanzo, who had recently moved into and redecorated the archive building because the library would have been too troubled to move it. After they entered the study, Tsunade located a big, comfortable armchair and sat down to wait impatiently. The elderly man, not in a hurry, took a moment to straighten a misaligned scroll rack before easing himself into his own chair. "So, I'm guessing you're here because of the incident a few days ago?" "Obviously. I've had conversations with all of the village's jutsu experts, gotten advice from the summoning specialists, and received briefings from the best chakra control masters. And now after all that, you come to visit an old collector of books. Why?" Hanzo asked, leaning forward and resting his head on his left hand. "Because no one else has a clue what happened. Yes, it would appear that you are in quite a difficult situation." "That is a major understatement," the Hokage remarked wearily. "Well, I've been predicting this visit, and have been doing some thinking and researching, but I first want to hear what other people have said." Tsunade paused to sort through the jumble of memories that had filled the previous 8 hours. "Well," she said, "I've never heard of any jutsu that popular, but I've been told it might have been Doden Jutsu. Some people believe it was a very strong genjutsu, but that also seems implausible. Aside from that, it might have been a manifestation of chakra, but that size would necessitate an unfathomably large quantity of chakra. An old proverb states that once everything that is impossible has been ruled out, whatever is left, no matter how unlikely, must be the solution." The elderly man nodded. "That was definitely some sort of chakra manifestation, which brings us to the much more intriguing and complex question of where it came from." Tsunade sat in her chair, wishing she had visited Hanzo first. His cool, headed approach, as usual, made problems seem easy to solve. "So where do we start?" The elderly man stated, "We begin with a poem." "A verse? What? As you age, are you becoming deaf?" "Indeed, a poem. More specifically, an extremely old poem." "Tell me how old you are. Are we talking about a century? 200 years? 500 years? Reaching behind his chair, Hanzo took out what appeared to be a slab of stone in a plastic bag. When he turned it over, he saw a 4 by 2 foot surface with tiny scratches all over it. "You've got to be kidding me," Tsunade said, staring. "This writing style was only in use between 1200 and 1600 years ago. It's the only document I've ever read about the incident. So read me this poem. Since the language has changed significantly and you wouldn't be able to understand it if I read it as written, I'll read a modernized version. Actually, the approach I've taken to update it is a relatively recent and, I must admit, fascinating process. It begins with making 2 copies of the manuscript and..." "Hanzo, oh, I apologize, didn't you want to hear the poem?" The elderly man noisily and slowly cleared his throat. Long before man was born, in the days when animals roamed the land freely, he awoke from his slumber, a creature of the deepest depths. His roar could cause the seas to rise, and the mountains fell with his roar. The populace ran away from him, lest his wrath fall upon them. However, some of them got up to fight, to put an end to his reign of terror. And 8 of them came out of them, who promised to seal the demon's doom. On the highest mountain in the entire country, the band resisted the demon. Over a period of 40 days and 40 nights, they fought over the barbaric heights. The heroes were aware that they couldn't prevail. Their swords ricocheted off the skin of the demon. Still, they refused to give up, but decided on a different battlefield. They battled among the standing stones as the day gave way to twilight and then to dusk. There, a ceremony was performed to transport them to the Shadow Plains. It is stated that they will stay there until they voluntarily make amends. Human souls can be used as demons' chains in that sinister place. As if he were an actor reading a script, Hanzo abruptly raised his voice as he concluded the poem, saying, "So, what did you think of that?" "Yes, it's a lovely poem, but how is it related to the incident?" "Do you think any human would have the chakra to manifest enough chains to enwrap a city?" Hanzo asked her, looking at her with a hint of condescension. "No, I've never heard of anyone having anywhere near that much," Tsunade said, looking shaken. "Therefore the only conclusion is that it was a demon." I guess, no, Tsunade, you don't guess. Although I find it unpleasant as well, if we begin to ignore the things we fear, the village will be destroyed. So Konoha has been ravaged by a demon once more. How am I supposed to tell the people without causing mass panic? Tsunade asked, taking a deep breath and closing her eyes. We weren't ravaged, to start. As I recall, only 3 shinobi and no civilians were slain. Since the few people killed were sent after the escaped prisoner and his rescuers, we should recognize and be grateful that the demon itself did not kill anyone. Second, more information can't hurt at this time because there is already widespread panic. So you want me to approach a city and tell them to be grateful that a demon attacked them? Exactly. There might have been hundreds or even thousands more casualties if the 4 Nukenin had just launched their attack directly. Oh, I'd never thought of it that way, obviously. The words, "You might want to watch how you speak to me," came out of Tsunade's eyes. She was shocked when Hanzo chuckled at her, saying, "Tsunade. Haim, you've grown accustomed to your position of intimidation. Before you were even born, I was a Junin. Actually, you may recall that I was in charge of your Junin exam." The Hokage remembered, in fact, how she had been totally sure of her skills before being completely beaten by Hanzo, who at 40.6 had already been too old for a shinobi. Hanzo continued, "The point being, I'm far too old to bother pretending to be intimidated by you youngsters and your filibusters. So, what else do you think I should know?" There was just a trace of sarcasm in Tsunade's words. "Well, the more I've thought about it, the more I'm sure the being we encountered is the one mentioned in the poem, but there seemed to be something missing." Tsunade nodded and returned to her serious demeanor, saying, "The final stanza had a totally different form than the others. Do you think someone rewrote the ending after cutting it out? In fact, I believe that up to half of the poem is missing, and I'm assuming that this was done to restrict people's understanding of this specific creature, whatever it is. The apparent issue is that the original might not even exist today if this version was composed more than a millennium ago. If it does, we'll find it. The other obvious solution would be to just find Naruto.kun and ask him about the demon yourself." Tsunade nodded her head. "I've had to send out squads to search the forest to keep up appearances, but it's obvious to anyone who knows about these things that with their heads start our odds of finding them in the wilderness are slim to none. Well, I advise you to hop to it, Tsunade. Sama. I doubt the village will be patient in trying to figure out exactly what it was that completely embarrassed us and damaged our reputation for strength." "I really don't need to hear that right now," the Hokage said with a small groan as she stood up. "Oh, but you do. The fact that a demon was involved will live on forever, even though the names of the shinobi involved will soon be forgotten and dismissed." As she approached the door, the Hokage appeared to grow increasingly depressed. "Well, I suppose it's time to go out and face the bureaucracy," she said. "Drop by again sometime, Tsunade. Haim, I do so enjoy our little chats." In the meantime, in the woods, Sasuke thought about the cloak that had only been his brother's for a few days, as he had done numerous times in the past few days. He knew rationally that joining the Akatsuki would be a wise decision for him. It offered a disciplined but not overly restrictive environment for Nukenins to hone their skills, but something inside of him still resisted. He put down the cloak and picked up the mission assignment, which had a map marked with the words, "Secret base here," in large block letters and an arrow pointing to the side of a poorly drawn hill, where Sasuke suspected a hidden door would be. The map showed an area close to hidden waterfall. After a few minutes of staring blankly at a page he had long since memorized, Sasuke lost patience and said, "I think you're enjoying yourself just a bit too much, Kabuto." He had sensed movement behind him but had refused to acknowledge it, continuing to study the map. "But I'm just training, Sasuke." "Sama," Kabuto said, pausing in the middle of his kata behind the Uchiha's back. "You're trying to make your cloak billow out as you fight?" Sasuke said slowly as he turned to face the medic icily. "It's not training." "Is there something wrong with wanting to fight with a little bit of style?" asked Kabuto with an evasive smile. "When you're bugging me, yes there is. I think you need to lighten up a bit, Sasuke, Sama. I think you need to stop being a distraction, as I am trying to decide our next move." "What's there to decide? We do missions for them, they give us money, and as an added bonus, we get cloaks, rings and cool hats. But still, you have to admit, Sasuke, Sama, that the hats are cool, and we get them for free. What other group gives out free hats?" "The Shriners. A rare valid point. But their hats aren't cool," Kabuto said after pausing. Sasuke ignored Kabuto and re-examined the mission request, his reason finally triumphing over his defiance. Jumping to his feet, Sasuke began packing up camp, trying to maintain his resolve. "So I take it we're leaving?" Kabuto asked, pausing mid-monologue to observe Sasuke's movement. "We'll try this mission, and if we succeed, we'll go from there." "Yes," Kabuto exclaimed, twisting his body until his cloak flung out behind him. "Free hat, here I come." Meanwhile, in another part of the forest. "What? How could you pack nothing but Pocky in your bag?" Kisame stepped back from the furious girl, leaving Itachi to confront her fury. "I like Pocky," Itachi said, crossing his arms. Tamari hit her forehead. "Yes, but we human beings need more than chocolate and wafer sticks to survive. Therefore, it is somewhat of a problem when one of our provision bags contains nothing but Pocky." "Actually, Tamari-san, there's some orange tang in the bag too," Kisame said, feeling compelled to contribute from 20 feet behind a tree. Kisame ducked back behind the tree as soon as he realized he had attracted unwanted attention to himself by glaring at it, only to discover Naruto dozing off in one of the branches above him. He cautiously made his way up the tree and jabbed the fox boy in the shoulder, being careful not to attract attention to himself again. Would I want Kisame? What are you doing up here?" "Well, I was sleeping until you interrupted me." Kisame took a seat on the branch. "I don't suppose you'd care to mention to Tamari that she was the one who just grabbed 2 of the 4 ration bags without checking to see what was in them." Naruto turned to see Itachi standing composedly amidst Temari's raging rage. Not particularly, for a brief period, they sat in silence while Itachi's verbal thrashing was still audible. "I'm getting hungry listening to her talk about Pocky so much," Kisame said, feeling her stomach growl. Pulling his sword from where he had lodged it in the tree, Naruto stood up and stretched. "Let's go get something then, we'll just take the long way around camp and find ourselves something to snack on," he said. After 10 minutes, Itachi had found something to do with his time after many unsuccessful attempts to sleep standing and with his eyes open. He could foresee Temari's next words if he paid close attention, and the more intently he watched, the more accurately he could do so. He was able to predict up to a complete sentence ahead of time based on her yes shift and subtle muscle twitches. "Yes, there's a town only a few miles ahead where we can get supplies," Itachi interrupted her protracted speech. Tamari gave up. "Don't interrupt me when I'm ranting, even my brother knows not to interrupt me when I'm ranting." "You were about to say, and you better hope there's somewhere up ahead where we can get real food, and so I saved us both time by answering the question before you asked it." "That's not what I was going to say." "Yes it was." "How do you know?" "I just do, if you're making fun of me all." "What the hell did you do?" Tamari exclaimed as Itachi abruptly disappeared, leaving her numb before she could even react. Itachi reappeared directly behind her, flicked the back of her head, and saw her attempt to swat at him but fail. "I just poked you in all 37 paralyzing pressure points," Itachi said while leaning over her. "How about this? I undo the paralysis, we get more food in the next town, and you stop wearing my ears off." Okay? Good then," Itachi said, prodding her neck until her body felt normal again. Naruto sensed that his current circumstances were seriously flawed. Tamari had made it clear that Itachi was not allowed to assist with food shopping, because Kisame was so noticeable. Naruto was given the privilege of assisting her with her shopping, while Itachi was punished by being forced to sit around camp and play his guitar and relax. There is definitely a problem. He didn't mind shopping all that much, but the way things had turned out didn't seem very fair. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice saying, "Hello? Can I help you?" Yeah, give me some of that," Naruto said, blinking at the fishmonger and pointing to one of the numerous bins containing a variety of fish. "Sure thing, lad. How much would you like?" the man said with a smile. "Give me 2 fishes worth, I guess." Naruto jumped a little when the monger produced 2 4-foot knives, even though he had already been in the town for a while. It took some getting used to, even though Kisame had warned him that people in the water country tended to use larger weapons and utensils. As he glanced down the street, he noticed a woman using a spatula longer than Naruto's height to cook on a grill. A young boy was eating with a 3-foot fork next to a man who was eating with chopsticks longer than his arm across the street. Done. Naruto was thrown a bundle of brown paper, which he caught with one hand and placed in his food bag before giving the monger some cash. He had to concede that they were extremely efficient, even if he thought their large tools were a little strange. He had nearly everything on his list now that he had fish, and the only thing left to find was cheese. But he had a suspicion that finding his last target at a fair price might be more challenging. He estimated that he had roughly an hour before he had to return to camp after glancing up at the sky. He nodded to himself and started looking for dairy. As he walked down the street, a young face watched him from behind the wall in an alley just down the street. Naruto didn't mind wearing seirei in public because he was in a city full of enormous swords and knives, but when a girl emerged from the alley into the street, her gaze was fixed on it, and she began to clench her fists slowly. Tamari was a kunoichi who was extremely disciplined. However, she was left unnoticed in a city full of upscale, wealthy clothing stores. A substantial sum of money. The money wasn't hers. She was becoming less self-controlling. Tamari tried to avoid temptation by running back towards the town's edge and eventually setting up camp before she could give in. She had nothing else to do in the city and could anticipate taking a nap before supper was ready, but she would be early, returning much earlier than she and Naruto had agreed. Naruto concluded that today was a fantastic day. In addition to receiving cheese, he also received premium cheese at a discounted price after allowing a storekeeper to admire his sword. He was certain that nothing could possibly ruin his day as he skipped down the street with his food bag. Sadly, he was mistaken. He hadn't even gone 2 blocks when he sensed a slight pull in his head that something wasn't quite right. Regarding his pursuer, she was tired of pursuing him since he had reportedly gone shopping and had significantly narrowed the distance without her being noticed. Naruto sped up as he moved through the crowd, being careful not to look behind him so as not to startle whoever it was. His senses were still being pulled, so he abruptly turned onto a side street and accelerated once more. Naruto began to use his senses as he wound his way into increasingly isolated parts of the city, away from the bustle of downtown. After a while, he turned into an empty alley and stood there, waiting for his shadow to move. She was crouching on a rooftop far above him. She had clearly been found somehow, but she had no intention of being overtaken by a common grave robber. "Kirigakure no jutsu," she said, barely above a whisper, as she ran through some seals. As the mist rolled in, she pulled 2 enormous curved scimitars from sheaths on her back. The boy most likely didn't know what kind of sword he had because she hadn't noticed him wearing a forehead protector. Fortunately for her, it also meant that he would likely lack the strength or even know how to use it. She took a deep, soothing breath before silently leaping into the fog and landing at least 30 feet behind her victim. Since most people tried to find their way out of the mist, she thought it strange that he wasn't moving, but she wasn't going to be so easily unnerved. As she had been trained to do, she moved cautiously forward, waiting for movement, but none was present. She got within a few feet and heard her target's voice for the first time. Naruto felt irritated. "Enough of these games. What do you want?" he asked, having gone out of his way, being hungry, and knowing that his cheese would soon go bad. "I'm not going to waste my voice on grave-robbing scum like you. If you have any last words, say them now," was the reply, which came from a young girl's voice. She was clearly trained to use echoes to conceal her location. "Well, I don't know who you are, but you seem pretty determined, so come on then," Naruto said, carefully setting down his food. She lunged forward with a low crosscut, hoping to pull out his hamstrings, and bristled at his conceit. After admiring her technique for a half-second, Naruto's fighting instincts took over and he began to turn, ripping his sword from its scabbards and twisting to parry her thrust with a vertical up-slice. Not one to think about such things, however, Naruto let a little chakra slip out and pushed, breaking the deadlock, her swords, and sending his unfortunate assailant flying backwards. They were deadlocked for a split second, giving both fighters a chance to see each other. Naruto was shocked to see that his opponent appeared to be no older than himself and wore a mist forehead protector. She rolled to a rather painful stop and hit the ground, staring at her broken blades with a mixture of horror and disbelief. These were swords that had been handed down through 3 generations of her family and had withstood 4 wars before being carelessly broken by a thug. She closed her eyes and said, "Before you kill me, tell me at least who you are." "No," she said, pulling herself to her feet. He was more than a thug. She hadn't witnessed his swordplay, but the results were enough to prove his skill. Only my uncle was able to control that sword in the entire hidden mist. Rolling his eyes, Naruto emerged from the fog and said, "Don't be dramatic. I won't kill you. But what you said about your uncle caught my attention. I had no idea Zabuza had any family." Her demeanor abruptly changed as she paused, saying, "You knew Uncle Zabu?" It was a very strange moment for Naruto, who knew exactly how serious the situation was, but he nearly laughed when he heard this girl who had just attempted to kill him talk so casually and use a pet name for one of the scariest men he had ever encountered. "You could say I knew him." The awkward silence that followed. I'm Mako, Momochi Mako, and are you a genin?" "Yes. Think of this as a free lesson," Naruto said, scratching his head. You will eventually be killed if you attack someone before you have a reasonable understanding of their level of power. In any case, where is your teacher? They're there to prevent you from acting foolishly like this. We're on a B-rank mission, but it doesn't start until later tonight, she said, flushed. Since Uncle Zabu's sword was marking his grave the last time I saw it, I assumed you must have taken it, and since you lacked a forehead protector, you would have come here to sell it on the black market. I saw you carrying it. Naruto again suppressed the urge to laugh. To be correct, it's my sword, and I would sell my kidneys long before I'd think of selling Seirei Kurite, Naruto said, gathering the shards of Mako's two scimitars as he tried to understand her rambling. Cutter of Spirit? You gave it a new name. Actually, it kinda renamed itself? What? Sighing, Naruto said, very lengthy tale. I don't mean to offend Zabuza-san in any way. Quite the opposite, actually. But the sword is now mine, and I'm running late for dinner. Hey, you can't just break my swords, beat me up, and walk away. You're kidding, right? He said, dropping the pieces on the ground in front of her. Take responsibility for your stupidity, you attacked me. Leaving a still somewhat shocked Genin in his wake, he strode over, grabbed his food bag, and headed out. Hey, hello. Return here. Do you hear me? No, I'm not, and what exactly are you going to do about it? Naruto said, looking back with frustration. I'll follow until you talk to me. What's to say I won't kill you first because I'm irritated? You don't seem to me to be the kind of person who would do that. She was correct, Naruto swore inaudibly, so, what do you expect of me? Are you looking for cash or something? Well, you seem pretty strong, and I was wondering if you might help with our mission, Mako said as she began to wring her hands. Return? I'm not kidding. Although our teacher seems confident, I'm concerned that we might not be able to handle this one. Naruto remarked sarcastically, so naturally the obvious thing to do is ask a complete stranger for help. Did it ever occur to you that I might be an enemy shinobi sent here on a mission or to spy? No. Then there was another awkward silence. Are you on a covert mission as an enemy shinobi? No. So why did you mention it? To make a point, it being that you have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with, Naruto said, raising an eyebrow. She raised her arms. You're at least as strong as a Chunin, so I really don't care who you are if you'll help me. How about this, you can come with me back to my campsite, I can eat supper, and you tell me about this mission. Mako instantly returned to his joyful state, saying, all right. At least as strong as a Chunin. Sheesh, was Naruto's complaint as he began to walk once more. Itachi was the first to notice Naruto coming, but he sensed someone else's presence and leapt to a tree branch to have a look. He leapt back down and prodded Kisame, his eyes slightly widening, saying, hey, Naruto brought someone back, a mist.nin. Looking up from her slumber, Temari said, so? He might have made a friend. Less composed, Kisame exclaimed, what, is he insane? I must hide someplace. Itachi added, and it's a girl. How is that relevant? Kisame asked, still wearing a shaken expression. It's a mist.nin. But when Temari learned this new information, she became inflexible, asking, what the hell is he doing? Itachi grinned to himself. It was fun to be him, especially now that Temari and Kisame were both in mild hysterics. Kisame leapt up into the trees after glancing around and finding no hiding spots at ground level. Just a few seconds later, Naruto came out of the trees and fell beside Itachi, closely followed by a much more animated Mako. It's your turn to cook tonight, Weasel.man, the foxboy said, holding out his bag of food. Okay then, but I'm rather curious as to the identity of our guest, Itachi said, taking the food with a little sigh. Don't mind me. Naruto.kun is helping me with a mission later tonight, so I'm just passing the tea. Mako, who is not the kind to let herself be introduced, jumped forward. She stopped, looked at the person she was speaking to again, and then made a "oh" with her mouth. You're Uchiha Itachi, aren't you? After nearly dropping his food bag, Itachi asked, how did you? Everyone on the ground followed her gaze as she pointed behind him to a tree that had a partially wrapped Samahata leaning on it. Kisame descended as violent profanity erupted above them, saying, damn it, Naruto. Giving us some war was the very least you could have done. When Kisame saw a pair of enormous, glittering, star-studded eyes, he exclaimed, Uwai. I can't believe you're really here. My name is Mako, and it's nice to meet you and I'm your biggest fan. Temari, who had been simmering quietly, was the first to sort through the jumble of words that Mako had just spewed, but it took Itachi, Kisame, and Naruto a few more seconds because the words had only the slightest resemblance to a sentence. The shark man simply stood there speechless for a moment before shaking his head and saying, "Excuse me? Kisame. Sama is touching me," was the girl's first reaction when Kisame reached out to steady her, as she was blushing red as a fire hydrant and appeared a little lightheaded. Thunk, and she passed out completely. "Am I the only one who finds this situation really weird?" Kisame asked, scratching his head. Naruto glanced around and said, "Sue, how about some supper?" The other three shook their heads slowly. "I got some nice cheese." Naruto gazed at what would be his dinner as though it contained the universe's secrets, and the scents of the tinfoil dinners cooking on the fire were slowly permeating the air and attracting noses as near to the fire as they could go without getting burned. "So, what exactly is this, Itachi?" "I took whatever fish that was you bought," the Uchiha said, looking up from rearranging the coals. Then Kisame interrupted, "Salmon. I took the," Itachi replied to Kisami's request, "salmon. Seasoned the inside with some herbs Tamari bought, stuffed them with some of that cheese, spiced the outsides a little bit too, and wrapped them in tinfoil with some carrots and thinly sliced potatoes." Naruto brightened and said, "Wow, it resembles what a chef would make." Kisame laughed. "If you're going to have to make all your meals yourself, they may as well be good ones." With a slightly irritated expression, Tamari raised her head from her work and asked, "Why am I looking for the girl? Naruto should be the one attending to his visitor." "Are you saying you'd want Naruto to search an unconscious girl who's only wearing what I must say is quite a fitting ninja uniform?" Tamari asked, oblivious to Kisami's increasingly snarky smile because she could only see his back. The sand girl looked at Mako's clothing, flushed, clenched her fists, flushed even more, and whispered to Kisame that she should do a number of things that would be extremely painful, if not physically possible. "I thought not," was the shark man's steady smile throughout this entire ordeal. Therefore, while everyone else gazed at the food, Tamari went about her search. Although it would seem that Tamari was the victim in this case, her investigation quickly turned up something far more intriguing than even Itachi's exquisitely prepared food. "Okay. People, you have to see this." Naruto and Kisame went to look over Temari's shoulder at what she was holding in her hand, dragging themselves away from the delicious smell of cooking fish. It was a picture of Kisame, torn from what appeared to be a bingo book, with a border of flowers drawn on it. Kisame went pale as Naruto laughed. Tamari kept digging, and a few moments later she came out with a small pocketbook called "Who's Who in the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist." As she turned the pages, she saw notes on nearly every page. Tamari and Kisame both snickered when they saw Uncle Zabu written in flowing cursive and the title Zabuza, Demon of the Mist, crossed out on Zabuza's page. That is, until they got to Kisami's page, which featured another full color photo with comments like, "Well, toned muscles, perfect height, cute ass." "I will do anything to keep Itachi from seeing these," Kisame said, leaning over and whispering as the list continued, but Naruto and Tamari were a little taken aback by the cute ass remark. Naturally, Itachi, who had far superior hearing than Kisame had given him credit for, was intrigued right away. "Not show me what?" Kisame leapt nearly a foot into the air in an attempt to seize the offending material, but he accidentally bumped into the sleeping Mako, waking her and bringing her back to the world of the waking. "It wasn't a dream, Kisame. Sama really is here," Kisame said as he was confronted by enormous sparkling eyes for the second time that day. "You're not going to faint again, are you?" Naruto said, tilting his head. "Not show me what?" Itachi said as he stood up and made his way to the huddle. Mako was going to respond to Naruto when she looked at what Tamari was holding and exclaimed, "Ah, how did you obtain those?" "Everybody stop," Tamari said, holding up a hand as she sensed that the group was on the verge of chaos. After 10 minutes, food was served, and Kisame and Mako were separated enough to avoid fainting again. "I'm sorry I didn't recognize you, Mako-chan, but the last time I saw you would have been. I was 6 years old," Mako said, glancing at the floor. "I sat next to you when Uncle Zabu and I attended a dinner hosted by the Mizukage. I remember, you were the one who choked on her milk during the Mizukage's speech," Kisame said with a start. Itachi and Tamari finally understood after listening to the conversation. "So you're Zabuza's niece, and I suppose you want help with this mission later because," said the Uchiha, nodding slowly. Mako raised her arms in protest. "Naruto took one of the most legendary relics of my family and broke 2 others. The least he can do is help me with one measly mission." "For the record," Naruto said, half growling, "you attempted to sneak attack me, and your swords broke. Furthermore, is it not possible to have them re-forged? Still, they'll never be as good as they were originally." "That's incorrect, little girl," Kisame said, picking up one of the fragments and examining it. While not exceptional, these are respectable weapons. Especially not with Naruto breaking them so easily. If I set my mind to it, I could perform better than this. After noticing from Naruto's expression that he had said something rather stupid, Kisame trailed off. Oh no, why not? I'll take Temari with me on this mission tonight, so you and Itachi will have plenty of free time, asked Naruto. Yes, but, no buts. Consider it an opportunity to repay someone who thinks you have a cute ass, Naruto grinned. I wrote that when I was 10 years old, Mako said, his face looking like a tomato. Is it not possible for a girl to keep her childhood crushes private? So, Naruto, what is Mako's swordplay like? Kisame stated, clearly trying to shift the conversation. She's pretty fast, but her actions are as predictable as Itachi's in a candy store, Naruto said, leaning back and stretching. Someday I'll get you all back for making fun of me, Itachi said, grabbing some Pocky and beginning to munch. He turned to the mist girl and said, as I was saying, her actions are too predictable, but you might be pleased to know that one of the parries I used on you was one that Kisame taught me, or rather, that he used on me and I learned. Despite the fact that my sword is stronger than yours, it worked just as well on me as it did on you. The words, still, I got beaten so easily by someone barely older than me, was Mako's first pout. Kisame finished his fish and then leaned back with Naruto, gazing up at the sky. So, Mako, when are you supposed to meet your team for this supposedly risky B-rank mission? I should brief Naruto and Temari-san pretty soon actually, she said, glancing at them, if you don't mind. As they made their way to the city's southern boundary, the two Nukanen were briefed on the mission. It's really a pretty simple mission, Mako sighed, adding that a band of bandits had set up shop and were operating too near to the city. The Poobah in charge of this region hired us to get rid of them. Poobah? Temari inquired. Oh, I keep forgetting that you two are not locals. Poobah, or simply, Pooh, is the title bestowed upon the lower ranking officials who govern both urban and rural regions. If you can get past his strangeness, Vincent, the man who hired us, is actually a pretty good ruler. Mako nodded her head. But anyway, the band who we were assigned to eliminate has no known shinobi affiliated with it but contains over 70 men and is well armed, trained and equipped, which is why the local guard haven't been able to do anything about them. Naruto remarked, so basically, you just want our help in case your team gets into trouble? Mako grinned, that's right. Although I'm still a little anxious, knowing that you're close by will help me feel much better in the event that something goes wrong. I need to go meet my team now, so if you two could take up positions now, that'd be great, Mako said as they came to a stop as they were almost at their destination. Finding the bandits won't be difficult, and we'll arrive shortly. I hope the two of you won't ever have to come out. The mist girl ran into the city after saying that. Nay, Itachi, I hope you're well rested, because I'm gonna need some of that fire you throw so well, Kisame said, frowning as he looked at the broken swords. The Amaterasu is not for forging swords, Itachi said, raising his head from his guitar. Are you unaware of any fire jutsus? There are none that I can utilize without running the risk of destroying the forest. Managing fire jutsus is not something I have much experience with. Now that I think about it, I haven't done much weaponsmithing lately either. So really, we're just making it up as we go along, Itachi said, putting down his instrument. Yeah, pretty much, with a slow exhale, the Sharingan user said, all right, let's get started. Mako gaped at her instructor. What? You heard me, he said slowly, after further consideration, your fears have some merit to them, so we're going to hold off the attack and call for another team or two. But, we can't, I mean, you're the one who recommended it, so don't be upset when we do as you said, sighed the Junin. No way, Mako said, dropping to her knees. But they should be able to manage themselves, and they'll realize that we're not coming as long as they don't reveal their location, she muttered to herself after taking a deep breath. Naruto and Temari sat in a cage in the bandit camp south of the city. Somehow, I just knew this was going to be one of those days, Naruto said, leaning against the bars. Well, it's our fault for being detected, we shouldn't have underestimated them. Naruto muttered, still, we could have fought back a little, before taking a blow to the head. We would have placed them on high alert and made Mako's mission even more challenging if we had put up any significant resistance. In addition, we don't have to worry about being discovered, and this cage is probably more comfortable than any other place we could hide. Naruto was knocked down when a guard approached and rapped on the bars. Hey, inmates should refrain from speaking if they wish to survive. Seirei Kurite was only 10 feet away, and Naruto struggled mightily to keep the Kyuubi from tearing the guard to pieces. When the man returned to his post, Naruto finally cooled his head. When the obnoxious guard returned, The two Nukanen were just beginning to wonder what had happened to Mako and her group. "All right, brats," he said. The guard glanced between them and then lecherously at Tamari. "The boss said he wants to see you one at a time," he said. When Naruto nearly killed the bastard for the second time that day, Tamari took hold of his arm and whispered in his ear, "I can handle any situations that come up, so promise you'll control yourself." The guards handcuffed Tamari and led her out of the cage toward a ring of tents where the elite of the bandits lived after Naruto gave her a look that suggested he would not do such a thing. She was half pulled along until they finally arrived at the largest tent of all and she was pushed inside. "Hello, lovely woman. Why'd I always meet such strange people?" Tamari asked, glancing at the creature in front of her. "Having just met you, I don't really know," said the Bandit King, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The man's clothing was so encrusted with bells that she could hardly see any fabric at all, and he jingled as he moved. "Is that how you always dress?" "Yes, I do. I'm just the type of guy who enjoys being recognized. A robber who enjoys drawing attention." "A bandit king," she replied, "and for a bandit king, one's reputation is as or more important than one's fighting ability. I suppose, in any case, you and your friend have put me in a difficult situation. After trespassing with weapons like yours, I truly can't let you live." Tamari said, "From your perspective, I guess that's true," and sat down on the floor, cross-legged. "So I guess all I can do is ask for your forgiveness for what I must do," the king said with a determined nod. "If nothing else, I'll try to make it quick for you." Tamari wanted to give Mako an opportunity to act, but she was beginning to worry that she might have to break free while he was speaking. "Nay, Mr. Bandit King. You could at least let me live a little while, couldn't you? First, let me eat something nice." For a moment, the bandit thought, "Yes, of course, why not? Fetch me food, worm," he said in an overly dark voice as he approached the tent's door and opened it slightly, his face completely changing. "I must amuse our lovely visitor. Ha 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 ha." He closed the tent flap inside. "Sorry, but I have to keep up the appearance that I'm doing all kinds of unspeakable things to you, so if you could holler like you're in horrible pain once in a while during dinner I'd really appreciate it. You intend to murder me afterwards, it's not like particularly I want to, and at least I'm treating you civilly. Your men think that you're doing, as you said, unspeakable things to me?" Tamari asked, gradually tuning out the rambling Bandit King as something nagged at the back of her mind and she went rigid. "Well, yes, indeed. I say that again to improve my reputation? So, word will spread throughout your camp. Yes, indeed. Though I'm a little sorry that your friend will have to consider what might be happening to you. I'll tell him the truth before I kill him so he can rest in peace. Gossip is a bandit's best friend." He leaned over to Tamari after noticing her sudden lack of response and asked, "Are you feeling okay?" Her eyes seemed to pity him as she looked up at him, and the man was even more shocked when she said, "The men in your band. They're the worst of people, right?" Only a little surprised, the Bandit King said, "Very much." He nodded to himself, saying, "Too many people in this profession forget that there should be honor among thieves. So why do you ask? Even I have trouble dealing with them sometimes. These unspeakable things you're supposedly doing to me, Naruto will have heard about them by now," Tamari said in a quiet, solemn voice. The sounds of chaos suddenly filled the air, as though triggered by her voice. As Amaterasu singed him, Kisame jumped and exclaimed, "Shit! Itachi, exercise greater caution. Do you have any idea how strenuous this is?" the Uchiha said, leaning against a log and panting. "Stop being such a baby, please. We might as well finish the other sword since we've already finished the first one." "Naruto is a negative influence on me," Itachi said, pulling himself to his feet. "I would have killed you by now a year ago for being so obnoxious." "Whatever you say, you're still acting like a baby," Kisame said, rolling his eyes. Mako and her team were anxiously awaiting the report of a scout who had been sent to check on the bandits' camp as they stood in Puba Vincent's office. The young man's legs looked unsteady and his skin was as white as chalk, so the doors slammed open and two city guards assisted him into the room. The Puba got to his feet and slammed his hands on the desk, saying, "What did you see, and what does this mean?" With vacant eyes, the scout said, "Dead, all of them, dead." Mako's Junin instructor nearly passed out, saying, "Wow. By whom?" "Couldn't see, missed, didn't hang around," the scout said, shaking his head. "There is an unknown force in my territory that can wipe out that powerful of a group without so much as a whisper," the Puba said, slowly scanning the room. "I want to know who they are, right now." Almost everyone in the room, with the exception of Mako, who was staring blankly into space, jumped into action, as did the advisors and city guardsmen. They couldn't possibly have two people that young and no older than me. She kept repeating these mantras to herself, but her mind kept returning to the moment Naruto had repelled her attack with what she now understood to be terrifying ease. Standing among the rubble that had once been his tent, the man who had once been known as the Bandit King gazed around at his former band of bandits. There was the stench of blood in the air, the occasional moan could be heard, and many were dead, while those who were not were dragging themselves to their feet and fleeing as quickly as they could. A girl sat in the center of it, and a boy, with his eyes closed and his body covered in minor cuts and bruises, lay down with his head in her lap. The man watched them in silence, his mind still not quite adjusting to the world around him, and as his thoughts gradually came into some sort of rational order, he walked slowly in their direction and saw that the boy seemed to be sleeping, his chest rising and falling slowly. "Are you aware of what's there?" In a low voice, he questioned the girl. The reply was, "A boy, one with great power," was the man's new focus after he slowly turned to take in his surroundings. "Yes. He cares about you very much, I hope so. I don't think you completely understand what it is that's laying with its head in your lap," the man said, taking another look around him before slowly shaking his head. "That's probably true, but I can do my best to understand him," the girl said, laughing softly as she looked up at him. "He must lead a very sad life. Once he did, but I'd like to think his life is improving. You have a person there who would wipe out a city to make you happy," the man said abruptly as he turned and began to slowly leave. There was a brief pause while the man thought about what he would say next. "You need to guard your emotions and take responsibility for all your actions, or someday he might." She gazed up at the sky and laid her hand on the boy's forehead, caressing his hair as he slept among the dead, watching as the man walked away, his bells jingling softly, gradually fading away until he was no more visible. Mako slowly made her way back to Itachi and Kisami's packing spot late that evening. As she got closer, Kisame raised her head and asked, "Have you seen Temari and Naruto?" Tears welled up in the mist girl's eyes. "I apologize. The bandit camp was destroyed after my teacher decided to postpone the mission, and nobody is aware of what transpired." As he reached forward to grasp her shoulder, Kisami's hands formed sign language as he recalled a particular fainting incident. "You ought to console her, Itachi. I don't do the comforting thing, so why me?" was the Uchiha's reply. "I can't touch her, though, unfortunately, then." "You worry too much. Those two can handle anything the world throws at them," Kisame said, giving up and attempting to calm her down. "And we finished your swords," the shark man said, smiling and reaching into his bag. "It's not nearly as good as my brother's work, but it's still not bad." Like magic, the girl's worries vanished as she grabbed the swords and exclaimed, "Hand forged by Kisame. Sama himself." Her eyes brightened once more. "I'll cherish them forever." Itachi helped some too, as the shark man's perspiration flowed. Itachi's glare pierced the back of Kisami's head with its still, chakra, drained gaze. "Okay. Maybe Itachi helped a lot, our mission was completed, but we're getting no payment since we didn't do anything," Mako said, pausing her 1-minute cuddle with her new swords to reach into her pocket and take out a business card. "This is the Poobah's card, and he might give you some cash under the table if you were tactful." "Okay. Thanks, I guess," Itachi said after accepting the card. "You're not going to tell anyone that I'm back in the country of water, are you?" Kisame said, rubbing his head. "Because that would be really annoying and I'm loyal to my village, but I'm also loyal to my idols, and I don't think the two have to be mutually exclusive," Mako said, grinning at him after expressing horror at the very idea. "Don't get killed, brat," said Kisame with a smile. "I won't, and tell Naruto my uncle would be proud to have someone of such skill hold his sword." She put her hand to her face to cover the first traces of tears as she turned and ran back towards the city. "Are you going to tell Naruto what she said?" Itachi asked, looking shifty. "I'd," after the two had watched until she was out of earshot. Kisame grumbled, "Hell no, the kid doesn't need a bigger ego than he already has." "I think you're jealous, shut up, Itachi." After taking a deep breath, Naruto leapt, falling straight down for about 10 feet and hitting the water with a violent splash. He opened his eyes to see the water around him turn red from the blood on his body and the stained clothes he was still wearing, and he felt some of the tension in his muscles release. Standing above him on the cliff, Temari's humility and her desire to be clean were engaged in a fierce battle, but one that her humility was bound to lose, or rather, what was left of the clothes he still wore. "Hee, so much water, water everywhere," she exclaimed, jumping into the water with a great deal more grace than Naruto had. "Well, we are in the country of water, so one would assume that there would be a lot of water here," Naruto said, giving her a strange look. There is probably more water in this lake than there was within 100 miles of hidden sand, so I'm allowed to enjoy it. Tamari saw Naruto examining his various wounds, ignoring her overindulgent enjoyment of the water, and asked, "How'd you get so beat up, anyway? It's not like you." "For the first little while, I was fighting armed soldiers with just my," Naruto said, prodding at his cuts and bruises while glancing down at his hands and claws. "What prevented you from drawing your sword?" It was directly adjacent to the cage. His face was unreadable at that moment, but she could hear something in his voice that made her shudder. "I wasn't really thinking straight at the time. I told you I could handle myself, why didn't you trust me?" she said, sinking deeper into the water and turning her head away. "When you felt that things were getting out of control, I trusted you to take action. When the guard informed me that the Bandit King enjoyed eating his dinner while making the female inmates perform a striptease, I took action because I thought the situation was out of control. Still, to defend myself, I didn't harm anyone who didn't attack me first, with the exception of our guard, whom I enjoyed killing. Even though I left the camp in a mess, more people managed to escape than perished, and I would act exactly the same way if I were in the same situation again." The Bandit King's words, "You have there a person there who would wipe out a city to make you happy," made Tamari tense. Sadly, her tension led to muscle cramps, which immediately and visibly caused her to sink like a rock. Naruto glanced over his shoulder and said, "And anyway, Tamari, hi there." After 2.5 minutes, with a backstroke, Naruto said, "You enjoy the water a lot, don't you?" "Ha ha, very funny." Tamari glared as she caught her breath in the shallows. "Well, I thought so." After unwinding, Naruto began to float in the water on his back. "Nay, Tamari, have you ever wondered what it would be like to be normal?" "What do you mean, normal? You know, learn language and math in school instead of using murderous methods, work at jobs instead of going on missions, and so forth." "Well, not really, however, it appears that you have." "Sometimes I do, and I also make an effort to visualize those around me. If Itachi had never received a kunai, how would he have behaved? Would he have pursued a career in science? Or a banker, perhaps? Is it possible that Kisame would have evolved into a teacher or a swordsmith?" "You really think about things like that?" asked Tamari, with a little laugh. "Remember the first time we met? It was when we met, not when we first saw one another. If you're referring to when you used a potent psychological attack on me, knocked me out and tied me up, then yes, I do. Now see, whether or not you ever think about it, you score much better than average when it comes to looks, and so I like to imagine that if we lived regular lives and I had just seen you walking down the street, I would think, hey, that's a cute girl, as compared to, crap, she's seen my face but I can't kill her, which is what I actually thought that day as you blasted away my concealing mist." "Why would that be so different?" Tamari asked, blushing once more and berating herself for feeling ashamed over such a small compliment. "Well, we could go about our daily lives as usual. Do the typical foolish things that teenagers do, like watching movies, hanging out with friends, and taking long walks on the beach. I think you're looking at your life all wrong." Feeling her return to the water, Naruto asked, "What do you mean?" "Easy," Tamari said, sliding through the water and giving him a back hug. "I expect you to give at least 3 hugs a day and to try to stop avoiding touching people the way you currently do. First, we're going to address your problem of only allowing non-violent human contact when you're either asleep or emotionally disturbed. Okay, and secondly, this Saturday, you and I are going to a movie. But we'll leave Itachi and Kisame to do whatever it is they do, and I'm not taking no for an answer on this." "Well, I suppose I should just keep quiet." "Exactly," she said, resting her chin on his shoulder. Before the others began to awaken, Kisame sat happily in the light of the dawn, relishing his brief moment of solitude. Kisame and Itachi had many unwritten agreements after years of dating, one of which was that Kisami's time was in the morning. Regretfully, Naruto did not sign the agreement. "Good morning, Kisame. I see you're especially obnoxious this morning. What's the occasion? Is there something wrong with just being happy to be alive?" "Yes. It interrupts my quiet time." With a pout, Naruto returned to his sleeping bag and climbed inside, saying, "All right, then. You see, that was the time when you were supposed to say, 'It's all right, Naruto. I was just kidding. I enjoy your company.'" After a few minutes, Naruto exited his sleeping bag and walked back to where Kisame was sitting. "But I don't right now, because you're interrupting my quiet time." "Still, you were supposed to say it to make me feel better." "Actually, I really don't care about making you feel better either." With a groan, Naruto went to light a fire. As breakfast was almost finished, Kisame stood up and stretched languidly as the sun began to rise above the horizon. So then Naruto, there was no sign of you two when we turned in, so when did you get back? Kisame asked. Not exactly sure, but I can't have been asleep for more than 5 or so hours. How come you're awake so early then? Wasn't sleeping too well, so I just decided to get up. As the boy reached to taste some of the eggs he was frying, Kisame's nose twitched and he took a deep breath, analyzing the numerous scents he detected and saying, he gave Naruto a weighted look. What? You smell like blood, water, and tamari. The blood I can understand from your little bandit hunting excursion, but as for the rest, do the math. Tamari plus water plus him plus laid out, we were in the water with our clothes on, Naruto said, choking and spewing out a partially broken egg. Blinking, Kisame said, oh, too bad, with a, these look tasty. Expression. The shark man grabbed the pan from Naruto and asked the frozen boy, what are you doing? Trying very hard to forget what you just said. Why? The eggs really are tasty. One of these days you need to tell me how you make them. So, what information do we have on this Mamoru Shinobu? Kabuto asked as he sat down next to Sasuke, who was eating peanuts out of a bowl in a bar. Far as I can tell, pretty typical rich guy. Dabbles in politics, has multiple houses and is currently at his main estate. Well known for having violent conflicts with his wife, he's considered somewhat of a brute. Any clues as to who might have placed the price on his life? Nodded Kabuto, probably one of his sons. They stand to have the most to gain from his death and aren't well known for getting along with either of their parents. So we're being employed by a person to kill one of his parents and frame the other? Essentially, Sasuke got up and said, alright then, let's move out. I don't want to hang around in any place for too long. Konoha caught me once and I'd rather they not do it again. They didn't realize they had nearly nothing to do that day until after everyone had woken up and eaten breakfast. Naruto had 2 left for the day after giving Tamari a good morning hug, but he wasn't sure how to handle the other 2, so he chose to worry about them later. It was okay to train in the morning, but by the middle of the afternoon, Naruto was starting to get restless. He was going into, what was for him, uncharted territory because it was Friday and he would be going to a movie with Tamari the following day. In such circumstances, one would typically seek advice, but Naruto wasn't sure if he dared to ask Kisame or Itachi for their opinions on such a delicate subject. Especially since, as far as Naruto was aware, they were both single and always had been. He lay on the forest floor, sweat trickling down his body from training, and engaged in what philosophers refer to as stewing in one's own juices. Being the more sensible of the two, he finally made the decision to speak with Kisame and simply strike up a conversation to see where it went after stewing for more than 30 minutes without ever reaching what he would describe as a satisfactory conclusion. Since Itachi was playing his guitar and Tamari was in the city for the afternoon, Kisame was training by himself and was therefore not too difficult to locate. Naruto, who was still a little insecure, watched with some jealousy as Samahata was thrashed using sword katas that were much more intricate than anything the boy had ever performed. After finishing the routine with a last twist and downward crosscut, Kisame walked over to where he had a bottle of water and slowly lowered Samahata. Naruto felt the need to move forward into the light before saying, I see you're as frightening as ever, Kisame-san, even though he knew rationally that he had been detected for a long time. I'm doing well today. I had been worried that my skills might have been getting rusty, but apparently not, Kisame said, reaching out and taking several gulps of water. I don't suppose you'd like to show me some of those sword forms? Huh. You think you can keep up? We'll see, won't we? After taking a few more gulps of water, Kisame picked up Samahata and assumed a stance that Naruto promptly imitated. Kisame would slowly go through a brief series of movements, as had become their custom, and Naruto would mimic them. They would keep going until they had completed the sequence 2 or 3 times. After that, Naruto would begin attempting the form on his own, and Kisame would fix his errors. Nay, Kisame, have you ever had a girlfriend? Naruto asked in an attempt to be informal after waiting for a few minutes until they had settled into a rhythm. A long time ago. Why do you ask? Naruto exclaimed as the shark man faltered mid-cut and lost his balance, lowering himself to one knee to regain his balance. Naruto paused to compose his response, a little surprised, saying, I've just never heard you talk about that kind of thing. There's a reason for that. Let's try that last form again from the top, Naruto said as Kisame turned to face him and he had a dark expression on his face. Kisame's incisive retort was temporarily forgotten as Naruto abruptly realized that he had somehow managed to dedicate his afternoon to training as well. When supper time finally arrived, Naruto was prepared to go to bed. He realized he had forgotten something just as he was about to dive for his sleeping bag. He managed to unexpectedly embrace Kisame from behind, which caused a great deal of confusion and chaos, but he then reached a standstill. Uchiha Itachi, who was only a few feet away, was observing Naruto intently after spotting his small game. However, Naruto was preoccupied with his irritation at Temari's apparent enjoyment of seeing him make a fruitless attempt to reason with the Uchiha. "But I need to." "No," but Temari says, "No. Just this once." "No, I'll pay." "No. Bu." "No." After diplomacy failed, Naruto had no other choice. Leaning forward, he tensed every muscle in his legs. Naturally, Itachi was faster, but Naruto ran after him because he didn't want to miss his first day hug quota. Regretfully, Itachi appeared just as reluctant to let Naruto get within 10 feet of him. And so began an almost 20-minute long chase of epic proportions. When Itachi became immobile due to something wet and cold trapping his feet, the impasse was finally broken. Naruto collided with him after this sudden halt, leaving them both in a heap on the ground. Itachi slowly got to his feet after giving an innocent-sounding Kisame a menacing glare. Shortly after, a slightly confused Naruto followed. Naruto made his way to his sleeping bag and crawled in, satisfied that the only thing he would do was to run into Itachi at high speed. "Temari? Would I want?" he asked as he felt someone enter his bubble of perception after initially thinking he would be left alone. "You know that I wasn't really expecting you to try and hug Itachi," she said, crouching a few feet away and wearing a decidedly amused expression. "Then I'm glad I exceeded your expectations. Not only that, Kisami's eyes almost bugged out of his head when you caught him from behind, so for future reference, one hug a day will be fine from now on," he said with a half smile. "Really, Temari, Kisame and I are just friends, so there's no reason to feel envious. I have my eyes closed right now, but I'll bet you all the money in my pocket that you're blushing red as a strawberry." Then Temari, who was actually red as a strawberry, got up and stomped off in a rage. Naruto sighed happily as he tucked himself further into his sleeping bag. "Why does it seem like she would get me back for that tomorrow?" When Naruto woke up early the following morning, Kisame was nowhere to be seen. However, a note that was tapped to the frying pan provided hazy hints that the Shark Man had entered the city and would be coming back late that evening. Naruto decided to focus on breakfast since he didn't have any morning entertainment. He quickly fried 6 eggs for himself and 2 for Itachi and Temari. Naruto was the only one awake even after his eggs were soon extinct. He started stewing once more after being left alone. There was only one choice left for Naruto because Kisame had been of no assistance at all and he didn't even want to consider discussing relationships with Itachi, who had, after all, murdered his entire family. He sat and let his thoughts unwind. Desperate measures were necessary in desperate times. "Hey, bastard fox," he said as he opened his eyes and gazed into the abyss that was his mind. Since there was no answer right away, Naruto began to stray and soon found out why. The chibi fox was happily sleeping, curled up in a ball. Naruto kicked it, then. "What the hell? You were sleeping. I have long since discovered that most of your life is incredibly boring, so I sleep. Well, I need you right now. Seeing as how we aren't under attack, I'm going to assume you want help with something other than busting stuff up. Don't sound so disappointed. I almost never bother you, so you can afford to be at least a little accommodating when I do. You kicked me." Now that he was aware that he might have woken the fox incorrectly, Naruto said, "Not very hard." "Even so, it really hurt. I'll tell you what, I only need your advice on a few things, and I'll make it worth your while." "You better, runt." Despite the temptation, Naruto knew he had no time to argue with the fox. "Okay. Here's my problem. Everybody needs sleep, according to biology, but everyone sleeps a little differently. When Uchiha Itachi sleeps, he is only 95% aware of what is happening around him, whereas when he is awake, he is 100%. For someone like him, waking up is therefore not as significant as it is for others. For instance, he was aware that Kisame was far away, Temari was still asleep, Naruto was sitting close to the fire in a semi-aware state, and his nose had already detected the aroma of cooked eggs in the pan, ready to be consumed, long before he was even conscious. For Itachi, waking up thus consists more of simply choosing to get up and move, which he did. He wasn't a particularly fast-moving person, or rather, he never saw the need to hurry, despite what many might assume given his unparalleled speed in battle. He therefore walked slowly and deliberately to get some fried eggs, as if he were positive that his eggs would still be there whether he arrived in 10 minutes or 10 seconds. He eventually showed up, scooped his eggs onto a paper plate, and began to eat. Itachi had the rare sudden urge to do something after days of boredom, and since everyone else was busy, he wouldn't even have to explain himself, which was good because he didn't know what he was doing yet, or worry about someone else following him. He finished his eggs and crept out of camp, fully committed to his plan. Less strategy. Once more not in a rush, he reached the outskirts of River City after about 20 minutes and began to explore in the hopes of discovering something of interest. Fortunately, he found a woman behind a cart that advertised free t-shirts after he had been silently laughing at people using large eating utensils. Even though he didn't wear t-shirts, Itachi, like many others, couldn't resist the opportunity to receive free items. "Excuse me, miss, I'd like a shirt." "That's fine, young man, but you have to complete a short survey." "Your sign says nothing about a survey," Itachi said, squinting his eyes. She emphasized this with a phony, sugary smile. "Yes, but I assure you it won't take long, and it will help my company improve our services," she said. "I will take your survey," the Uchiha said, mentally balancing the time it would take to finish the survey against his desire for the t-shirt and the chaos that would result from simply pinning the elderly woman to the wall with a kunai and taking the shirt. The fake sugary smile widened and said, "Excellent, here you go." Itachi took the document and briefly considered using the pin old lady to wall, steal shirt, and run strategy, but he decided to accept his fate because he was too lazy at the time to want to bother avoiding the police. He took a seat in the adjacent cafe and looked over the survey he needed to fill out. Name. What is the job of Uchiha Itachi? Where does a shinobi live? Itachi wrote in his old one, somewhat bewildered. 12 Uchiha Lane, Konoha. Intercourse? Itachi blinked and gave the elderly woman a suspicious look. "No, thanks. How old are you?" 19. "Wait. Not sure which snack food is your favorite? Pocky. Which dish is your favorite? Pocky. Which dessert is your favorite? Pocky." He jumped up and handed the woman his paper, who gave him a shirt despite giving him a suspicious look. He was happy that it had gone so fast. Satisfied with his initial success, Itachi went in pursuit of additional amusements. Tamari rolled over, mumbling to herself as the sun made a valiant attempt to enter her eyes. Sadly for her, sunlight usually prevails in these kinds of conflicts, and this one was no different. Naruto, what time is it?" she asked, focusing on the lone other person in the area as she was compelled to wake up. From his spot at the fire pit, Naruto glanced over and said, "I'm not sure exactly, but it's around 11 a.m. With a bolt upright posture, she exclaimed, "You let me sleep until 11 a.m. "Yeah, why not?" She made up the excuse, "I wanted to polish my fan." Yes, that's right, polish my fan, because, after such a dramatic outburst, she couldn't possibly admit that there was no real reason to get up early. "Well, you can do that now," Tamari asked, "is that breakfast?" After smelling food. "Lunch, actually, but I made enough for you." Tamari eventually got up and walked to the food area after a few minutes, saying, "And we need to get a newspaper or something, because FWAP, sorry, wasn't looking where I was throwing that." After the newspaper bounced off her head, Tamari picked it up and turned to the entertainment section. "So, we have Jaws 10th Anniversary Edition, My Neighbor Totoro, Rocky 17, a bunch of dumb superhero movies, and Harry Potter meets Godzilla," Tamari said. "I'm assuming that one is pretty short." She read the summary carefully. "No, it's not. Apparently the main characters talk for almost 2 hours about their various angsty lives, so when the big lizard finally does come and crush them into a bloody mess, everyone is glad they're dead and leaves the movie contented. Ah, these movie makers are clever. Anyway, I'm for going to Jaws, since I've never seen it. I've seen a total of 5 movies in my life, so I'm good for anything." Naruto sighed as he served the meal. "What is this stuff?" Tamari asked after noticing what she had been given. "Pan-fried spam and instant rice. That sounds weird. Try it first, then comment." Tamari and Naruto spent the next few minutes concentrating mostly on eating because, much to their surprise, the spam and rice was pretty good. She didn't realize it was suspiciously quiet until she had almost finished her meal. "Where are the 2 fruitcakes?" she asked. "Out, I guess." Neither really specified what they were doing, shrugged Naruto. "All the better for us then. Having those 2 always around gets a bit tiresome." "Maybe, but they've been invaluable to me as friends. I would have been dead months ago if not for those 2. "Still," Tamari said as she finished her last bite of lunch and tossed her plate into the fire. "Yeah, I know what you mean. In addition, you wanted a fruitcake free day, and today we have one," Naruto said, pushing the log he had been sitting on aside and lying down on the grass. "Not quite, there's still one left." Tamari laughed and shifted to sit nearer to him when her legs were abruptly kicked out from under her, causing her to fall forward and hit Naruto with a dull thump. By saying, "You said I needed to work on human contact," Naruto was able to conceal his laughter. "Ah, this is kinda comfy," Tamari said, pushing herself up but only slightly shifting her position so that she was next to him rather than on top of him. She decided that two people could definitely play this game. That was not what Naruto had anticipated. Anxiety washed over him in waves, his moment of confidence evaporating like a cheap fireworks display. "What is it with you?" Tamari asked, drawing herself closer as she sensed his tension. Naruto muttered, "I've always been this way, people never touch me." "Wait a second, didn't you live in some kind of foster home in your early life?" "Yeah. They changed my diapers with tongs and bathed me by holding me by my arm and dunking me in soapy water. Most people in Konoha would have rather cut off their own hands than touch my stomach. I don't even know what that is, I can't even imagine." At first, he remained silent, waiting for his nerves to settle. At last, Naruto reached around and drew her flushed body up against his. "Don't worry about it," he said, grinning and sounding relatively relaxed. "This is one of the better things I've had to get used to in my life." After going through several phases of awkwardness, normalcy, peace, and finally comfort, the tense silence passed. Naruto soon began dozing off in the afternoon sun as neither of them gave much thought to the passing of time. Well, even though Naruto was sound asleep, his mind responded to those words like a bucket of cold water, but he kept his eyes closed and said, "Hello Itachi, when did you get back?" quietly. Naruto heard the laughter leaking from his voice as he said, "Oh, just now, you two certainly look cozy. What time is it?" "Just past 3. With a groan, Naruto began to slowly move, which naturally roused Tamari. After a few yawns, the two were fully awake and back on their feet in a matter of seconds. "What's with all that crap you have, Itachi?" Naruto asked, noticing something strange as he stretched. "That's why I'm here, I got tired of carrying all this around," the Uchiha said, holding a large number of boxes of various sizes, all filled with stuff. "But what is it all?" Tamari leaned forward, wiping the sleep from her eyes. "I managed to get some free stuff from just walking around, then found an underground casino. I kept playing and kept winning, but decided to stop half an hour ago since I had almost more than I could carry. I plan to go back there now that I've dropped this stuff off." "Oh," Itachi waved and disappeared. Tamari stated plainly, "Well, that was pretty embarrassing." "Could have been much worse. How do you mean?" "It could have been Kisame that found us like that." "Okay, you have a point there," Tamari said, closing her mouth after opening it to argue. "Actually," Naruto replied, "it's probably a pretty good thing Itachi dropped by, or we might have been late for the movie." "Meh, we have half an hour yet. How come you fell asleep, anyway?" "You had just woken up?" Naruto asked, giving her a questioning glance. She hesitantly said, "Well, actually, you fell asleep a while before me." "Then what were you doing all that time?" "Nothing." In the background, crickets were chirping. "Really?" "Yes, really, more crickets, if you say so." "Okay, I'll admit it. I noticed something while you were asleep that seemed strange, and it's been bugging me ever since. How come you don't have any scars?" Tamari said abruptly as Naruto went over to tidy up the forgotten lunch dishes. "Huh?" Naruto asked as he paused and turned to face her. "All shinobi get hit sometimes, so most of them have scars. Even Itachi has some, but why not you?" she said, extending her arm to demonstrate. "Because I don't heal, I regenerate," was a statement Naruto had to recall from a previous conversation with the Kyuubi in order to respond to this question. "I know you heal fast, but there should still be a scar." "No," replied Naruto, "healing and regenerating are two completely different things. Healing is when your body replaces destroyed or damaged tissue with new tissue. Regenerating is when your body replaces damaged tissue with the same tissue." What? Naruto thought, it's difficult to explain to some who can't do it, and then had an epiphany. "Okay, you and Kankuro are siblings, right?" "Yes, but you're not the exact same. The two of you have the same parents, but there are many differences between the two of you. That's how healing is. The new flesh is similar to the old, but not quite the exact same. Now regenerating on the other hand could be compared to a set of identical twins. Not only do they have the same parents, they are physically identical in every way. So then when you get hurt, your body replaces the material with flesh completely identical to what was damaged." "Exactly. Regenerating isn't very common, since it's pretty much a demon thing, but theoretically, I could even regenerate whole limbs with enough time and chakra." So you could get a tattoo, and then when you were sick of it, cut off your arm, grow a new one, and get a different tattoo? Temari asked, pausing for a moment. As Naruto perspired, yes, they left camp at around 3:30 because their movie was showing at 4:15. Naruto reviewed everything the Kyuubi had told him before they left. Flashback. Okay brat, since you seem too serious about this, you'll have to follow a few basic rules. No problem, give them to me straight. You're going to have to not be an idiot. You often don't remember to do things like think before you speak. Fine then, but let's try to avoid the personal insults from now on, shall we? Technically, you're going on a date with a coworker, so the same rules apply. No discussing anything shinobi. Like and no bringing weapons. But what if Temari brings her weapons? She won't. But, good God, she won't bring any weapons. How can you be so sure? You live as long as me, you learn a few things, now do you want my help or not? Yes. Then shut your mouth and listen. Naruto remained silent. Now, as I was saying, I know this might be a stretch for you, but you should try and work on your charm. Charm. Yes, charm. It's not hard, it just requires you to think in a different way than you usually do. Explain. Being charming means smiling, using what little wit you possess, and that sometimes you need to do something, often something frivolous, for someone even though you know they're fully capable of doing it themselves. That sounds dumb, but I know what you mean. Good. You again prove that you are, in fact, smarter than you look. Is that it? Naruto asked, growing weary of the fox. No, most important of all, you have to learn to be less of a weenie. Remember the personal insult thing? Yes, but I don't care. You need to stop being a weenie. No girl is going to respect someone who has a phobia of physical contact. May I remind you that my being so screwed up is mostly your fault? Again, I don't care. And just so we're absolutely clear on this, if you don't keep up your half of this bargain, I'm going to kill you in your sleep, and consequences be damned. Yeah, very scary. To my immense surprise, you've been pretty useful today, so don't worry about your reward. And remember, brat, no weeniness, go to hell. Finish the flashback. As they prepared to depart, Temari was a little taken aback when Naruto announced that he intended to part with his sword before she even mentioned it. She was taken aback once more when he proposed that they walk rather than run, and even more so when he asked to hold her hand. She began to question if this was indeed Naruto by the time they arrived at the theater. Naruto gave Temari money to buy snacks while he got tickets because they arrived with plenty of time but wanted good seats. Large popcorn, please, and 2 root beers, Temari said, turning to the oily man behind the counter after weighing her many snack options. What are you going to? The man asked, grabbing the popcorn scoop and wiping his oily hands on his oily shirt. Jaws, since it's supposed to be really good. It is, but you might find it a bit strange today. How? Temari asked, curiously grabbing her popcorn. Well, this strange bluish guy came in this morning and bought tickets to every single showing today. Even weirder than that, the guy always cheers for the shark, rather loudly I might add. A couple people have even left the theater because he disturbed them so much. Temari went white and ran to where Naruto was about to purchase tickets. Naruto, changed my mind, let's go to, she said, glancing quickly to see what else was on at the moment. Harry Potter meets Godzilla. All right, no problem, Naruto said, blinking. 2 hours later, melodrama. In a sort of daze, Naruto and Temari left the theater. Well, Naruto grumbled, I was right about those movie makers being clever. By the time Godzilla showed up, I was ready to rip into those whiny wizards myself. Well, it certainly was an experience. Speaking of which, Naruto inquired abruptly and inquisitively, why didn't you want to visit Jaws? I heard a rumor that someone strange was in the theater and was causing problems. Ah well, I guess we'll need to see Jaws some other time. You hungry? Yeah, kinda, Temari said somewhat self-consciously, hoping her stomach rumbling wasn't audible. So what do you feel like eating then? I don't know, why not find a seafood place? We are in water country after all. Sure, though I can't imagine seafood can get better than that fish Itachi made. That's because you've eaten nothing but junk your whole life. Hey, instant ramen is good. Instant ramen hardly counts as food, Temari said, rolling her eyes. Fine then, you pick where we eat and then we'll see if I think it's better. Choosing to make fun of him, Temari located a convenience store, took out a travel guide, and gave the man behind the counter some cash. You better prepare yourself, because today your concept of food will be blown away, she said, waving the book like a weapon as she went back outside to where Naruto was waiting. Sasuke, who had long since forgotten his dinner, paced uneasily around his hotel room. When he sensed someone at the door, he stiffened, but when Kabuto cautiously entered the room, he relaxed. "Any sign?" he asked. "No, Sasuke. Sama. There don't appear to be any Cloudnen in the city." "Fine, but this will be the last night we spend in town. How did your intel gathering go? Anything new?" "Not really. This Mamoru is a tough customer. All his employees are so afraid of him that I couldn't get so much as the name of his wife out of them." "This probably goes without saying, but you were discreet in your questioning, I hope." "Of course, not a one of them suspects I was anything more than a nosy reporter." "So, we're going to just have to go to the estate ourselves and see what we can find out," Sasuke said, dropping onto his bed and gazing blankly at the ceiling. "Looks that way, Sasuke. Sama, what did I tell you about doing that?" "Doing what?" Sasuke. "Sama." Adding, Sasuke. Sama, to the end of your sentences. I thought I told you to stop that. "You did, Sasuke." "Sama, then why haven't you stopped?" "It would be too disrespectful, Sasuke." "Sama. Okay, now you're just doing it to annoy me." "I would never, Sasuke." "Sama. I can't even imagine going out of my way to annoy you, Sasuke." "Sama. Don't you know that, Sasuke?" "Sama?" "See, the thing is, I can't tell if you're being serious or not," said Sasuke, turning to face Kabuto. "Why would I not be being serious, Sasuke? Sama." "Never mind." Naruto gazed in disinterested wonder at the eatery Tamari had selected. "You plan to eat here?" "Yeah, why not? It's so fancy." "It's a sushi restaurant, Naruto. There's nothing fancy about sushi." "I've never been to a place like this before, which is why we're going, now come on." Naruto took his menu and sat down to read it assiduously, while Tamari looked absently at hers. Naruto nearly passed out when their order was finally taken, saying, "Man, it was really hard to decide. Only because you acted like the fate of the world depended on what you ordered. I had to be sure I made the right decision. You do realize that if you really wanted to, we could come here again tomorrow." In actuality, he was unaware that, "I was pondering something earlier. Why do people think movies make good dates, anyway?" Was Naruto's attempt to change the topic after feeling foolish. "Because they don't require any interaction, but doesn't that eliminate the purpose of going on a date?" "Yes. But people like nice passive activities since they eliminate the need for such inconveniencing things as conversation." "Are most people really that shallow?" Tamari sighed. "It's just human nature. Remember the first girl you had a crush on? If you think back to it now, what was the crush based on?" "Point taken," Naruto said, hanging his head. Naruto was looking at the ground with a dejected expression when he felt a sudden sensation. He looked up again, scanning the surrounding tables in what he hoped was a casual manner so as not to alarm anyone needlessly. Naruto's gaze was drawn to the elderly man and middle-aged woman seated 3 tables to his right. He initially thought it was just a woman and her father going out to dinner because neither of them appeared particularly odd, but there was something about the elderly man. "Father, that boy is staring at us," said the anxious woman at the same table. "Don't look. He felt my chakra, just a moment ago." "How?" "It's perfectly masked. I sneezed. When you sneeze every bodily function stops for a fraction of a second, and during that fraction of a second I lost control and he sensed the chakra that leaked through." "Impossible. I didn't feel a thing." "Well, that's because your senses aren't yet well enough attuned," the elderly man said, stroking his chin. "He is young, father. There is no way someone of his age could have such perception." "Ah, but you assume too much. Let us go, we shall eat somewhere else." "But do we really have to go?" "Yes," the elderly man said, casting a sidelong glance at Naruto. After the elderly man got up and grabbed a massive walking stick from beneath the table, Naruto watched as his daughter steadied him and they left the building. "Hello?" Earth to Naruto, was then said while a hand was waved in front of his face. "What? Oh, sorry, was just a little distracted." "Yes, you were. What was up with those 2 people?" Tamari mused. "I'm not sure, and really, I don't care, so I can get to interrogating you about relationships now. It's not like there's anything to tell. I'm not sure why, but every girl I knew was either stupid, weak, or more likely, both." In her hazy recollection of her time in Konoha, Tamari said, "They didn't seem quite that bad, except that Sakura girl, she always pissed me off." Naruto was immediately affected. "I'm not even going to think about her," he said, snarling as his muscles tensed and his pupils narrowed. Even the bastard Sasuke worked and bettered himself, but Sakura has never been anything more than pathetic. Even worse, she uses cruelty to hide her own worthlessness. She sounds like a bitch. Yeah, that's about right, she was one of the main reasons I left the stupid village in the first place. Tamari smirked and remarked, but that is definitely her loss. With his daughter following closely behind, the elderly man strode down the street. Geez, Dad. What's going on? She said, grabbing his arm as she grew frustrated by his lack of explanation. We're going to see the poobah. What? Why? Because, I think that boy might be far more than he seems, and if anyone in this city would know about any powerful shinobi in the area, it would be the poobah. A few minutes later, he rushed into the city's central tower, setting a vicious pace that made the woman behind the desk jump and ask, Can I help you, sir? Please inform the poobah that Zark and Seraphim are here to visit him, said the elderly man, who appeared to be in good health in contrast to his daughter who was breathing heavily. I'm sorry, sir, but he doesn't take guests this late. Zark was rubbing his head. Ah, I'm sorry then, for not being specific. In that case, tell him that a swordmaster of Hidden Mist is here with his daughter. Th. Those names again, sir? The desk clerk asked, her face turning pale. Zark and Seraphim. I'll tell him right away. After waiting so long, Naruto and Tamari ate as if they were starving when they finally received their food. Naruto consumed so quickly that he didn't even taste his initial bites. He said, Crap, this stuff is really awesome. I hate it that you're always right, as soon as the first taste hit his tongue after he had slowed down a little. The faster you get used to it, the easier your life will be. For a brief moment, Naruto spared her an amused glare in between bites. Their meal continued in relative silence because Tamari was quite hungry herself. Ah, that was tasty. I need to try some more new kinds of food, Naruto said as he reclined in his chair when there was no more food left. But later, because I'm going to explode if I eat any more. Like you said, there's always tomorrow. It worries me that you sound so enthusiastic. How much should we tip? Naruto asked, taking several bills out of his wallet. Some people say a percentage of the meal price, but I just say give the server whatever you think he or she deserves. Naruto got up and said, Ready to go? Before leaving 2,000 yen for a tip. Sure, it's actually getting pretty late. Naruto abruptly realized Tamari was correct. The sun had already set. As they were leaving the building, the walk back seemed unreal because there was only a sliver of moonlight and flickering streetlights for illumination. Tamari shivered as they rounded a corner and a chilly wind struck them. How come you never seem bothered by the elements? She asked. Aren't you just full of questions today? My hand is cold, but yours is warm despite the wind and the low air temperature, she said, pointing to where their hands were clasped together. Once I get a chance to examine you, I notice all this neat stuff and then I get curious. I don't know exactly how my body does it, but my temperature almost never changes. It has something to do with my chakra system and body composition, both of which are different than, say, yours. What did you do to yourself, anyway? Forced near lethal amounts of demonic chakra through my system. I knew you were crazy, but that might be a record. Nah, it's worked out pretty well for me in the end, as well as being, as you put it, neat. There are major advantages to having a body like mine, and even now I'm not even sure I've figured all of them out yet. Alright, then, I'm borrowing some of your body heat, Tamari said, abruptly grabbing his arm and holding it to her chest. The voice in his head kept saying, Weenie, 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 as most of Naruto became anxious, but he forced himself to relax. After he calmed down, he found the contact to be quite enjoyable, as it made him feel good. They returned to camp in this manner, neither of them really feeling the need to speak again. The night grew nearly dark as they left the city limits and entered the forest. For Naruto, moments like these were when the world really came to life. With his eyes closed, he allowed his other senses to take over, including hearing, tasting, feeling, and smelling the forest. He was completely conscious of his surroundings, so even without sight, he was not afraid. Using his sophisticated senses to simply appreciate his surroundings was pleasant, he thought. Like hundreds of tiny hidden microphones, he could hear the rustle of leaves, the scratching of tiny animals, and Temari's heartbeat. It was an accurate simile, he thought a moment later, but not the most dramatic or emotional. About half a mile from the camp, they came to a stop, and Tamari appeared irritated. Naruto stayed silent until she spoke, not wanting to start a fight. We have a dilemma. What kind of dilemma? See, often the success of a date can be determined by whether the guy offers to walk the girl home, to her door. We live in the same place, exactly, and this is a conundrum? Yes, it is. A maelstrom slowly brewed in Naruto's belly as he looked down at her slightly pouting face in the moonlight. He wanted to go for it more than anything, but his body was frozen. Weenie. His inhibitions were broken in that one instant. He turned on his right foot, put his free arm around her waist, and gave her a passionate kiss, causing Tamari to squeak in shock but not move to push him away. She began kissing him back slowly. Although neither of the participants had much experience, this kiss was rather awkward in the world of kisses, but it had an air of irrational wonder, similar to a young child's first spoken word. Naruto said, "I think that was a good enough indication that our first date was a success," as the maelstrom that had been churning his stomach moments earlier was replaced by the warm fuzzy feelings he had experienced earlier when they broke up. "In actuality, I don't think I quite got the message the first time," Tamari said, regaining her confidence and grabbing his shoulder. With Jaws memorabilia all around him, Kisame sat back at camp and asked, "What are those two doing out there? It's been 5 minutes since they moved." Itachi raised his head and asked, "Would you like to go check? And perhaps interrupt something? I never said anything about going to check, but I am curious. Think of it this way, if we don't actually know what they're doing, we can just assume whatever we want," Itachi said as he went through the box of items he had won from gambling. "And, of course, mock them ceaselessly about it," smiled Kisame. "Exactly."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.